across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, top of the morning to one and all. It is 3 minutes past 6 on a Friday. It's Mark Dolan sitting in for the big man on Morning Glory, and a big 4 hours coming up. Welcome to Hateful Britain. Anti-Semitic chants and violence as Aston Villa beat Tel Aviv in a half-empty stadium. Britain is now becoming a hotbed of anti-Jewish intolerance. So can the genie go back in the bottle? I'll get views from across the political spectrum. Also, as Tory legend and chief Brexit negotiator Lord David Frost steps away from the Conservative Party, and with a new poll revealing that even tactical voting won't keep Nigel Farage out of number 10, are Reform UK officially Britain's next government? Speaking about governments, what about the current administration? Well, Tony Blair has blasted Labour's employment rights package. I'll get a reaction live in the studio from one of Britain's best known and most successful entrepreneurs, Charlie Mullins. And let me tell you, he's not pulling his punches. Now, just a year ago, deportations were politically impossible, politically toxic. But now, the idea of putting people who are here illegally and have broken law on a plane, sent back home, is into the mainstream. I'll be speaking to a man who's responsible for that, Rupert Lowe, live at 9 a.m. And if she raises taxes, which is now expected in her November budget, is Rachel Reeves' political career over? I'll be asking one of the country's best connected political journalists. And the bad headlines keep coming for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he's now ordered to appear before Congress in the United States over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. When will this nightmare end for King Charles? And this is not a drill. The monologue is back. In today's Dolan's Dispatch, the BBC stands accused of political bias. Our national state broadcaster is becoming Britain's weakest link. That is Dolan's Dispatch at 8 a.m. It's a beast. You won't want to miss it. Now, my priority for the next 3 and 4 hours is to get your opinions on the national television and radio airwaves, because don't forget, you can hear us on DAB+. You can listen to us in-app and online, or you can watch the show. Just head to YouTube and search Talk, and up we pop. And I want to get your views on the radio and on the telly. 0344 499 1000 is our number. Tommy's on the phones today, and let me tell you, he's on fire. Directing our television output is Titus, who, let me tell you, is a man's man, and pressing the buttons. The queen of this place, Amy, is our engineer today, and the boss, Dean Spencer, couldn't do it without him. We're looking after a big show. It's 4 hours. 0344 499 1000. I want you in the conversation. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. And as the saying goes, let's talk. And we'll start with a look at today's front pages. And we'll begin with the Sun newspaper, Britain's best-selling national newspaper. Ex-Prince told to help probe. Tell us what you know, Windsor. Disgraced Andrew Windsor. By the way, they seem to have dropped even more names now, even more words around his name, because previously it was, of course, the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, no longer Duke of York, then Prince Andrew, no longer Prince Andrew, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Well, now Andrew Windsor has been told by US congressmen to appear before them and explain his links to the disgraced Jeffrey Epstein. The former prince received a letter informing him that a powerful committee have a suspicion that you may have valuable information. Should he stay or should he go? Is he on a hiding to nothing? Is he, if he faces American lawmakers? Let me know your thoughts on that. Daily Mail now. What double standards? BBC newsreader broke rules by pulling a face because her script said pregnant people, but bosses don't seem to care that Panorama doctored Donald Trump's speech. Well, that is, of course, the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch at 8 o'clock. The newspaper, Labour splits at the top as new deputy leader tells Reeves, don't raise income tax and break the public's trust. Daily Mirror. Star Carr wins hit show. Top traitor. It looks like Alan Carr, the comedian, has won the Traitors. Andrew's scandal new twist. Also right, the Daily Mirror. Summoned. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was formally requested by a US Congress committee to give sworn evidence about his late pal, Jeffrey Epstein. The Guardian, Powell in challenge to Reeves over tax plans. Labour should stand by its manifesto commitment not to raise income tax, national insurance or VAT. The party's deputy leader, Lucy Powell, has said, demonstrating, as many feared, that she would be a thorn in the side of this Labour administration. The Times newspaper, cabinet ministers accused Lammy of cowardice over prison release. David Lammy has been accused by cabinet ministers of incompetence and being a coward over his handling of the accidental release of a second convicted sex offender. The Justice Secretary is facing criticism from colleagues after repeatedly refusing to confirm that this man had been freed during exchanges at Prime Minister's questions. Let's be honest, his performance at PMQs was a hot mess, and it would have been entertaining if it wasn't somebody that's responsible for running the country. Income tax will go up, Reeves tells Watchdog. Rachel Reeves has told the budget watchdog that she does plan to increase income tax as she looks to repair the public finances. The Chancellor has informed the OBR that a rise in personal taxation is one of the major measures on tax and spending that she's preparing to announce this month. And Andrew's Palace Pitch business is shutting shop. The commercial arm of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's Entrepreneurs Scheme has withdrawn all of its remaining funds as the King formally stripped his brother of his official title. And Pauline Collins, the Shirley Valentine actress, has sadly passed away at the age of 85. A wonderful actress and by all accounts a wonderful lady. Daily Telegraph, Davey must explain or quit, says Johnson. BBC chief at centre of biased reporting storm told to come out of hiding by MPs. Boris Johnson, remember him? Has led calls for Tim Davey, the BBC Director General, to explain or resign over the bias scandal engulfing the broadcaster, which, as I've said, I'll be dealing with in no uncertain terms at 8 o'clock in Dolan's Dispatch. Andrew is summoned by Congress over abuse claims is the other story in the Telegraph. And pressure on Lammy over 90 violent criminals freed in error. Daily Express. Nigel Farage ranks up calls for parliamentary probe into grooming scandal. End the gang's inquiry, dither and delay, says Nigel Farage. Cunning Alan Carr is king of the celebrity traitors. And Daily Star. Carr smash. Most useless faithfuls. Alan Carr wins the hit BBC show. To react to the big stories of the day, I'm delighted to welcome one of the best connected journalists in the country. It is the political broadcaster and commentator, Theo Usherwood. Good morning, Theo.
Very good morning to you and great to be with you.
Great to be with you. Welcome to Morning Glory and welcome to Talk, the home of common sense. Income tax will go up, Rachel Reeves tells Watchdog in The Times, in the worst kept secret in politics.
Yes, no surprises here. I mean, if you think back to her speech at the beginning of the week, where she was paving the way for tax rises, you listen, to hear that actually the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, which is the watchdog of public spending, has now, off the record at least, provided that, guidance that actually taxes are going to go up. I think it'll be a hammer blow to many of your viewers. There was a promise before the election that Rachel Reeves wouldn't put up, and Keir Starmer wouldn't put up national insurance, VAT, and of course income tax. I think they said they were dancing on the head of a pin when they put up national insurance for employers last year. And then, of course, after that budget, that Halloween budget, they insisted that they wouldn't come back for more. And they've had to come back for more because the public finances are in such a dire state.
Has the world changed? Is that a reasonable excuse?
No. Insofar as we know, the Liberation Day that Donald Trump ran, the tariffs, that's obviously had an effect.
But that was long trailed. He called himself Mr. Tariff when he ran for office.
But there have been decisions, whether it's the £10 billion worth of public sector pay rises that were announced in the first financial statement to the House of Commons when Rachel Reeves became Chancellor. They came into power. There's a question mark over that. Businesses warned that if you put up taxes for national insurance contributions for employers, that is a jobs tax. That is going to harm economic growth. I always remember last May, ahead of the local elections, being up in Scunthorpe with Nigel Farage, and this business owner, the cafe where we were sort of doing a walkabout, she was virtually in tears as she said, her overheads have gone up £23,000 a year, and this is just on a cafe selling cakes on Scunthorpe High Street. She didn't have the headroom to be able to absorb that such a significant rise in her day-to-day costs, and she employed 16 people. Would she be able to take on other people? And of course, if you support businesses by keeping taxes down, then they can take risks and they can expand and they can grow, and ultimately that will mean more tax receipts coming in to the Treasury if you keep taxes at a lower rate.
Most definitely. Rachel Reeves will be Chancellor at the November budget, 26th of November?
26th of November, yeah.
But if she raises any of those three key taxes, which is likely to be income tax, she won't be Chancellor in a year's time, will she? She can't actually survive this politically, surely.
Well, funnily enough, I'm not sure it's MPs who will get, or Labour MPs who will get a say in this, or indeed any opposition MPs who get a say in this. The people who will have a say in whether Rachel Reeves keeps her jobs will be those who work in the square mile just over the river from where we are. What I thought was quite telling was that, after she just gave that speech where she hinted at tax rises, the pound fell to a 7-month low.
Yeah.
And the reason that's happening is because foreign investors are looking at this country and they're going, no, thank you. We don't see Britain as somewhere where we want to we don't want to put our money, we don't want to invest into this country. That's why the pound fell. Now, if she actually goes and puts up taxes, we could see, the danger for Rachel Reeves is that we get a situation where actually investors start pulling their money out of the country, and actually we end up, and we rely very heavily in this country, it's no fault of Rachel Reeves or indeed Keir Starmer, we rely very heavily on foreign investment in this country, and if that starts to happen, we could end up in a dire situation very quickly. And if the markets ultimately decide, if you're looking particularly at the cost of government debt and the 10-year bond yield spikes up, the government debt, because you have to remember, when she put up that £40 billion of taxes last year, the cost of government debt went up, and £1 in 4 that she raised, £10 billion extra, went on paying off the government debt. That's like getting a credit card bill, and before you actually get to pay off that widescreen telly or pay off what you paid for the car, you've just got to pay the interest on that. And that's not a good use of public money.
Well, coming up, a new thorn in the side of Sir Keir Starmer in the form of his deputy. Lucy Powell will bring you details on that. The BBC rebukes a newsreader for telling the truth about biological sex. Also, we'll have a look at what happened in Birmingham last night, the Aston Villa Tel Aviv game. Does it demonstrate that Britain is a hotbed of sectarian hatred? And is Nigel Farage going to be Britain's next Prime Minister? All of that coming up. Don't go anywhere.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
6:20, this is Morning Glory. Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. Don't forget, at 9 a.m, Rupert Lowe, the man who has made deportations become politically mainstream as an idea. Would deporting foreign criminals tackle the issues that we've got facing in this country? Let me know your thoughts. 03444991000. Front page of today's Daily Telegraph. Ed Davey, I should say Sir Tim Davey, the Director General of the BBC, must explain or quit, says Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, has led calls for Tim Davey, the BBC Director General, to explain or resign over the bias scandal engulfing the broadcaster. MPs also said it was time for Mr Davey to come out of hiding after a week of disclosures by the Telegraph of one-sided reporting over Gaza, censorship of the trans debate and the doctoring of a speech by Donald Trump. Theo Usherwood, how much trouble is the BBC in?
The BBC's in a lot of trouble. I know Johnson's gone for Tim Davey. Tim Davey, by the way, was an appointment when Boris Johnson was, I think it was certainly under the Conservatives. And he is, of course, a former leader of Hammersmith and Fulham Council. I personally don't agree with calling for Tim Davey to go. I think the problem with that is that actually the BBC kind of wins if they get rid of Tim Davey. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who sat in a fairly high-level meeting at the BBC, and when Tim Davey was engulfed in a scandal, and the mid-management sort of sit back in their chair and they go, Director Generals come and Director Generals go, and there's this sort of this idea that the person at the top will always carry the can, but the BBC will just carry it and sailing straight towards the iceberg. Yeah, you know, it doesn't change. And if you look at what they've done with Martine Croxall,
the newsreader who insisted on saying pregnant women rather than pregnant people.
It beggars belief. I just don't, and especially you could. I always would disagree with that particular stance that they've taken, but you could almost understand their view had we not had the Supreme Court ruling. So had we not had that decision, that ruling from the very highest court in the land, that sex is biological, that you are born a man or you are born a woman, that was the ruling. Had we not had that, you could almost understand how they could do the mental gymnastics to say that she'd broken the rules. But given what the Supreme Court has said, I just don't understand how they can possibly come to the conclusion that she has somehow breached their editorial standards. And what I don't think people in the BBC realise, in fact, I don't think many people realise, is that, and you were discussing, we're going to come on to discuss it in a minute, the likelihood now that Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister, that the reform becomes, I think it's probably likely that they have an overall majority in the House of Commons, certainly as the way polls stand. And if you look at the direction of travel of the polls, you know, the split between reform the rise of reform and the defenestration of the traditional political parties is only growing. It's not, they're not. Nobody's coming back. We're not looking at Labour suddenly. Whoo, they're back up at 25%. It's not happening, right? And I think what we've looked at it in terms of the context of the economy, in terms of immigration, but we haven't looked at what the rise of Nigel Farage and reform means in terms of public sector broadcasting. And his plans to cut the licence fee to £30 a year would decimate the BBC. It would have no way of coping, and the knock-on effect to other broadcasters who rely on public service broadcasters would be huge as well. And I would. They're not going. I don't think any executive of the BBC will be watching this morning. I don't imagine you're necessarily their cup of tea, Mark. But if they are,
more's the pity. They might learn something.
They might learn something. But if they are, I would urge them just to start to think very carefully about the direction. The direction the country's going politically, what that means for the BBC, what is coming in fairly short order to the BBC in terms of their future funding and what that will mean for the BBC, because decisions like this will only strengthen the hand of Nigel Farage. I personally would like to see a strong BBC with its strong remit, because I know plenty of members of my family. My mum watches Songs of Praise. That happens. Songs of Praise happens because there is a public sector broadcasting element to it. It's not something that you can.
It's not a commercial show.
There's nothing commercial.
Songs of Praise is not like Top Gear.
Exactly. You can't sell it. You can't sell it, and you can
even though it should, because those vicars are lovely.
But
some of the nuns as well.
But that doesn't happen without the BBC, and I think there's a value to that. But if they're going down, if they are going down this route where they're becoming so ideologically focused on one particular, in the way that they have become, then it's going to only strengthen the hand of those who actually just want to strip the BBC to its bones.
Well, let's take a listen to the newsreader Martine Croxall, and this was a bulletin earlier this year in which she corrected herself when the script said pregnant people. Take a listen.
London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine has released research which says that nearly 600 heat-related deaths are expected in the UK. Malcolm Mystery, who is involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions need to take precautions.
Well, there you go. She's been admonished by the corporation. There may be sanctions, but ultimately now this is politically very awkward for the BBC, like you said, given that Supreme Court judgment. So is it the official policy now of Reform UK to slash the licence fee to £30 a year?
I don't know if it's...
Or is it one of Nigel's aspirations?
I think that's something that he's talked about, but if you...
Because I've got a lot of aspirations, including dinner with Paris Hilton.
But but you have to remember, Mark, that unlike dinner with Paris Hilton, which I think would rely on...
she'll barely eat. It'd be a cheap date. She'll have a starter. That's probably, prawn cocktail. She's good to go.
But Paris Hilton would have to say that she wants to come along on this date with you.
That's a good point. That's the sticking point.
But unlike, this is if Nigel Farage wants to reform the licence fee, the only thing that would stand in his way is public goodwill towards the BBC, and the fact that actually people might turn around and say, well, if you do this, the BBC might turn around and say that if you do this, we won't have a BBC left that's worth talking about. There's no cost implications. Unlike, say, some of his other musings or ideas or views, particularly around, say, he's spoken about lifting the two-child cap on benefits, which would actually cost an amount of money. There's nothing penning Nigel Farage in from implementing a policy of slashing the licence fee to such a low level that we don't have that the BBC becomes almost completely reliant on its commercial ventures, which come to selling the Strictly Come Dancing format around the world and selling Top Gear on to that's the danger with this particular policy and where the BBC currently finds itself in, and that's before you get on to talking about the fact that Amazon, Netflix, streaming services. The fact you said when you introduced your show this morning, you can watch us on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, all of these things. You know, the BBC is getting squeezed from both sides, and I would have thought, if one was to be advising the BBC, that actually creating political rows where they just didn't need to with this Martine Crock, so you could just point to the Supreme Court judgment and say, look, actually she had a point, she's there, we're just going to let it be, is not a headache that they will need.
Speaking of reform, the latest poll conducted by Electoral Calculus has said that even with 100% tactical voting factored in, reform win a landslide. Yeah. And I think Labour have reached an historic low in terms of public support for the incumbent governing party. So even with tactical voting, Nigel is Britain's next Prime Minister, and he's still got time to grow his support. Because I don't know what you think, I'm not sure that reform have peaked yet.
No, I'm of the same view. I think there's probably further growth. I think they would have looked at that result down at the Carefully by-election a couple of weeks ago, and privately, I think Nigel Farage would have been quite disappointed. I think he would have, you know, there was a 12-point gap, 47 plays 35 between themselves and Plaid Cymru, and that we're inevitably seeing now the rise of nationalist parties in both in Wales with Plaid Cymru or SNP. To survive, I think they're going to have to do some sort of deal, or to beat Nigel Farage, they're going to have to do some sort of deal with Labour. But as you say, tactical voting here, you know, even taking that into account, Farage comes out on top. But you know, more generally in England, it's getting to the stage now. I don't know what you feel when you have the chance to leave London or go out and speak to people, but even people who I know, who I would consider as being left of centre, are starting to sort of go, yeah, I quite like the way I was with a friend the other day who, I would describe him as left of centre, was sort of wobbling his head and saying, well, actually, I quite like the way Nigel Farage speaks, or I quite like that he's a great orator, isn't he? And I think there's, you know, Farage is starting to move. If you imagine a dial in front of you and he started on the right of British politics, you know, with every turn he's creeping into the mainstream of British politics, and I mean I think he's been there for quite a while now. But and I think also what's happening is that public opinion, when you have stories like the one we'll come on to with migrant pensioners too old and lonely to deport, judges rule, I think public opinion starts to shift, and what we saw up in Epping is starting to shift rightwards as well. So you end up in a situation where the bulk of public opinion is very much aligned with where reform is, and that's a real danger for Keir Starmer.
Is there a danger that in an effort to enter the political mainstream, become a broad church, that reform loses its rather revolutionary, unique selling point?
Yeah, we've already seen that, and when we saw him getting rid of Rupert Lowe, when he expelled Rupert Lowe, there was a huge backlash. That Nigel Farage, who
joins us at 9 a.m. today.
But there was a huge backlash from the right of reform, who felt that Nigel Farage was letting the side down in a way that when previous, and I think, you know, I think they would consider this to be fair, but when you think of previous members of Nigel Farage's parties in various guises have come unstuck, you've never really seen a backlash. You know, Ben Habib, well, you know, with all due respect to Ben Habib, who's a really nice guy, it wasn't the same as what happened with Rupert Lowe. Yeah. But what I would say in Nigel Farage's defence is that whilst Rupert Lowe is an MP and he has considerable support, there has never ever been Farage had to make a decision that he wanted to go from being a disruptor, somebody on the sidelines of Westminster life, throwing rotten tomatoes at the political establishment, and now he's an alternative to the establishment. He has to, now he's an alternative in Westminster. That you can't just occupy a safe space. You have to get outside of your comfort zone. Tony Blair did it, Margaret Thatcher did it. You know, all the great political leaders managed to broaden their appeal. And Nigel Farage is no, you know, if Nigel Farage wants to be successful, he can't embark on a strategy that's any different. And it's very similar strategy to what Boris Johnson did back in 2018, 2019. You know, you have to find a way of, you know, appealing to a broader section than your base, because if you just go for your base, especially on the right or indeed on the left, the same's true on the left, we saw it with Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell in the Labour Party, you're not going to ultimately get very far.
Well, it's a low bar with Rachel Reeves in number 11, but is David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, the weak link in this Labour government? Another terrible, terrible week for him. We'll discuss that next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It is 6:37. You are watching and listening to Morning Glory. It's Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. At 9 o'clock, we've got Rupert Lowe joining us to discuss deportations. Have they now entered the political mainstream? Plus, welcome to Broken Lawless Britain. Rupert Lowe's wife had the front headlights of her car stolen in the capital. Extraordinary stuff. And we'll also be joined by Charlie Mullins, one of the country's best known, most respected entrepreneurs, to discuss Labour's workers' rights package, which has been blasted by Tony Blair, no less, who has urged the government to pause this policy. Quick look at a couple of the front pages. The Daily Mail, what double standards? BBC newsreader broke rules by pulling a face because her script said pregnant people, but bosses don't seem to care that Panorama doctored Donald Trump's speech. Well, BBC double standards will be the topic of today's Dolan's Dispatch at 8 a.m. The Guardian, Powell in challenge to Reeves over tax plans. Labour should stand by its manifesto commitment not to raise income tax, national insurance or VAT, according to the party's new deputy leader, Lucy Powell. And the Daily Express, end the gang's inquiry, dither and delay. Grooming gang survivors fear the government's national inquiry is less about the truth and more about a cover-up, according to the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, who the latest polling suggests will become Britain's next Prime Minister, even if the other parties participate in tactical voting. With me in the studio is Theo Usherwood, one of the best connected political journalists in the country. And Theo, let's take a listen to David Lammy discussing the absolute disaster of criminals being allowed to leave prison. Take a listen to this.
We had 800 errors under the last government. This has now gone on for a generation. Our prison system is in crisis, so we have to bear down on this, but we have a mountain to climb. At the dispatch box, I did not have all of the detail. That detail was actually released just later, after I had finished at Prime Minister's questions. I took the judgment that it is important when updating the House and the country about serious matters like this that you have all of the detail. I was not equipped with all of the detail, and the danger is that you end up misleading the House and the general public. So that is the judgment I took. I think it's the right judgment.
Well, I'm pleased to say, if you're listening on the radio, that Lammy, for once, was actually wearing his poppy. How much of a liability is this man to the government, David Lammy, do you think, Theo?
So I feel a little bit sorry for David Lammy because I think he's been stitched up by his officials to an extent. I know that's not necessarily a popular opinion, and that people want to just pin it all on David Lammy and say, and I thought it was a disgrace, by the way, that he wasn't wearing a poppy. I just think, like, come on. You know, but on this issue, they knew overnight, on the Tuesday into Wednesday, the Metropolitan Police had been informed on the Tuesday at 1 o'clock. They were scrabbling around trying to find this individual for nearly 24 hours. There was no reason as to why his officials couldn't, and he should have insisted on it, knowing that he's going to be standing in for the PM who's at COP in Brazil, shouldn't have had at least some information to updated MPs at the dispatch box so that he wasn't continually evading the questions being put by James Cartledge, the Shadow Defence Secretary standing in for Kemi Badenoch. That was a prerequisite. They were working to that deadline, him and his team, and they should have hit it. And there's no excuse for that, because what it speaks to is the fact that this one of the individuals, they only knew he was released when he had a court date and he didn't turn up, and it's 6 days until the Metropolitan Police. So I'm not when I say that, I'm not haggling, I'm not making the point because it's some sort of diary malfunction. I'm making the point because it speaks to the fact that the system's out of control, and that the officials working in his department and in the prison service and with the police, it's not working.
Is this mess a legacy of a decade or two, or is there anything to lay at the door of Labour, given the fact that people mistakenly released from prison seems to have jumped in the last 365 days? It
has jumped. The system has got, the administration has got worse.
I think Labour asleep at the wheel. What do you think?
I think what you're dealing with is a system that is under pressure, and I would have thought that actually the government would have been better off in just trying to sort out the issues within the system itself. I worry that the message it sends to the public is that they can't be kept safe, but more pertinently, the message it sends to criminals is that they can get away with it.
Yeah.
That you can take your chances, and on this particular occasion, they've figured out that 2 are missing, and of course with Hadash Kabatu, they realised that he needed to be brought back into custody and then deported. But actually, there will be others who've just literally walked out, and there's no follow-up, and they've not served their sentence, and that gives them the impression they can go and do it again and again and again and again, and they're not going to be punished. And for people who have, we're dealing with some of these individuals. We're dealing with people who are serving, I'm sure we're dealing with people who are serving time for significant offences that have ruined lives, whether they be sexual assaults, rapes, physical assaults, violence. People will have had their lives decimated by criminals, and the first job of this government is to keep people safe, and the prison system, a functioning prison system, is an absolute critical part of that.
Most definitely. 11 arrests, fireworks thrown and death to the IDF chants mar the Aston Villa game last night in Birmingham against Tel Aviv. Oliver Brown writing in the Telegraph, discrimination wins on shameful night at Villa Park. And Jake Wallace-Simons, the former editor of the Jewish Chronicle, British Islamism is rising to power. So is Britain now turning into a hotbed, a toxic hotbed of sectarian hate? We'll discuss that next.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
6:48, lovely to have your company. Mark Dolan looking after the hot seat here on Talk for Morning Glory, and a very, very busy 3 hours to come. I'll be joined live in the studio by Charlie Mullins, who is spitting feathers about the government's workers' rights legislation, which also Tony Blair has said must be paused in order to preserve jobs. Plus, we'll discuss deportations becoming less politically controversial with a man that's been talking about them for years now. Rupert Lowe is live at 9. And don't forget, this is not a drill. The monologue is back. Dolan's Dispatch at 8 a.m. today. I'll be dealing with the BBC in no uncertain terms amid an impartiality row. But the front page of today's Telegraph newspaper: 11 arrests, fireworks thrown, and death to the IDF chants mar Aston Villa's win against Maccabi Tel Aviv last night in Birmingham. Meanwhile, Jake Wallace-Simons, writing for the Telegraph, of course, the former editor of the Jewish Chronicle: British Islamism is flexing its muscles more and more openly as it rises to power. And Oliver Brown in the Telegraph: discrimination wins on shameful night at Villa Park. Theo Usherwood, this is a big problem. This is a major issue. Sectarian politics rife in the Midlands of this country, in England's second city.
It's you know, the decision not to. And I watched some of the statements coming out from various politicians with some incredulity when it was, you know, when we were told that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans wouldn't be able to attend this fixture, and it was all about, you know, what the community wanted, and it wasn't anti-Semitic, and it wasn't, you know. And I was like, I'm not sure this is going to be proven to be correct. But and needless to say, of course, the protests and the chants that we saw in Birmingham last night, you know, no surprises. And we then see, you know, and I saw some very disturbing images on social media of counter-protesters in support of the fans being penned in sort of metal chain fences. And I don't think it takes much historical insight to obviously recognise the deeply damaging way that they've been treated. Those counter-protests have been treated. It's a big problem, and it's a problem that exists because we certainly with this government we lack the political leadership to call it out. And I think the first thing you have to do if you're faced with a problem is you have to call it out and say it's unacceptable. And if you don't do that, then those who are perpetrating it just carry on.
Well, you're bowing to the mob, and it's a red herring to worry exclusively about anti-Semitism, isn't it? Because the argument made by Jake Wallace-Simons, the former editor of the Jewish Chronicle in today's Telegraph, is that if you bow to the mob, well, they're not just anti-Semitic, they're not just Jew haters, they hate British values as well. They are at odds with everything that this country stands for.
It's a really, you know, and I've said it before, and I said it in the wake of the terrible events at the Heaton Synagogue in Manchester, that, you know, an attack on a synagogue today is an attack on a shopping centre tomorrow.
Right.
And I think, you know, and I'm saying that actually from a position of knowledge. I kind of, in a previous life, when I was involved in political reporting, I spent quite a lot of time delving into this stuff, and it's very dark and very, very grim, and it doesn't, you know, and I've got many Jewish friends and many friends in Israel and in the Jewish community in this country, and so I hope they can respect me when I say it. You know, this isn't, and to Jake's point, when I say this really isn't just a problem for the Jewish community, this is a problem for all of us. And it's, if you don't stand up to it and say that it's unacceptable, and that isn't just about turning up as David Lammy did in the wake of the attack and saying, well, we won't let this happen again. It's about doing the small things that lead up to the big attack, and that includes allowing Maccabi Tel Aviv fans to attend the game peacefully and to support their team, and then without fear of being attacked or surrounded by a mob, and then to be allowed to return to Birmingham Airport and fly out of the country having had a good experience of Britain. That's what should have happened. It shouldn't even be that we're talking about the protest. We shouldn't even be talking about the protest. We are talking about the protest, but we should be talking about the fact they couldn't come to this game, and they should have been allowed to come to this game because the rules of UEFA allow Maccabi Tel Aviv to take part in this game. That's the rules-based order. It is not set by a council in Birmingham. The rules aren't set by a council in Birmingham. They're not set by a police chief in Birmingham. Yeah. They're set by UEFA. Football is a competition, is a competitive sport at the highest level, which brings people together from all parts of the world. If UEFA wanted to go and ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, they could go and do so, but they haven't, have they?
No.
And therefore, they're in the competition, and they should be given the same rights and privileges as everybody else in the competition, and that includes being able to attend away games.
Meanwhile, there's trouble in paradise. The I-paper, Theo, Labour splits at the top as new deputy leader tells Rachel Reeves, do not raise income tax and break the public's trust. Well, Rachel Reeves and the Prime Minister could do with this intervention like a hole in the head, couldn't they?
Absolutely. I mean, but we're going to have much more of this from Lucy.
I mean, this is unhelpful in the extreme.
Yeah, of course. It's pandering to Labour MPs, and what Labour MPs want to see is they want to see a mansion tax or wealth tax. That's what she's going to be. That's the round two that's coming on this particular
story. And that's
story.
the Andy Burnham playbook, isn't it?
Yeah. It's populist left-wing politics. It's saying, well, just tax the rich. If you tax the rich, if you don't listen to the bond markets, but it's suicide with the public finances. I mean, it's the end game. And I think, people are talking. We started at the beginning of the show talking about whether Rachel Reeves. Whether Rachel Reeves survives this budget. The danger for this government is that if Rachel Reeves doesn't survive this budget, then actually you end up with somebody of Lucy Powell's ilk or somebody else.
Be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. And when we saw Rachel Reeves crying at PMQs that time, and the financial markets had an adverse reaction, everybody sort of threw their hands up thinking that she was about to go. The real worry there was actually that they see her as somebody who is vaguely sensible in the Labour Party, and what they're really worried about is if she goes, who does Keir Starmer replace her with? Because Keir Starmer doesn't have any political capital now left with his own backbenchers, and he'll be under tremendous pressure to put somebody into the Treasury who will, from the left of the party, that would sort of, would look to tax the very wealthiest who are the income generators in this country.
Lucy Powell, she's not stupid, and she was in the cabinet, wasn't she? She knows that Rachel Reeves is going to have to raise taxes in the budget.
Yeah.
And therefore, this is a deliberate attempt to damage the government, isn't it?
Yes, but it's also rolling the pitch for setting out an alternative. So if you're sitting,
so this is the sort of insurgency. The leadership campaign has begun already.
Yeah, of course it has. I mean, we're going to have more. It's just the noise is just going to go. If you imagine like a volume dial, and we're on sort of 2 or 3 at the moment, every month it's just going to get turned up a notch. And that's what's happening here. And what this is about is don't put up income tax. Fine, look, I'm being nice and reasonable, don't put up income tax. What they really want to do is they want to introduce taxes they want an alternative, taxing the very wealthiest in this country. And of course, there's a huge especially dealing with the very wealthiest, there's a huge flight risk, or there's and this is something, people who are not in this country who are looking at places to set themselves up, to build a factory, to set up an office. They're going to look at London and go, actually, yes, it's had its hay. It was once great, and it was you had all the nice shops and restaurants and fast cars and nice flats and all the rest of it. But right now, I don't want to be putting my money into London, because if I put my money into London, I'm just going to have it taxed. And that's the real danger, is that actually we're putting off people who we need to welcome to this country, because at a low level they're spending money in our shops and restaurants and and services and so forth, and at the highest level they're actually investing into this country and creating jobs and wealth, which then lead to higher tax receipts that go back into the Treasury and pay for all the things we want, like health service and schools and everything else.
Lots of messages coming into the show. Good morning, welcome to Morning Glory. Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. This from Mick in Wallington. Mark, last night I was ashamed to watch a lone brave Jewish lady displaying an Israeli flag walking to the Aston Villa Stadium, being racially abused by hundreds of cowardly men, whilst our weak police ignored them. What next? Sharia law and yellow stars. Wake up, says Mick. How about this from Alan in Merseyside, who says, let's ban Birmingham from all future sporting events, citing Birmingham as an unsafe city thanks to all the protests. How about this? Lots more messages coming in. The anti-Semitism is not going away, says Paul, because Labour agree with it. If that was Tommy Robinson having a protest, it would have been him and his crew who would have been banned from Villa. If it had gone ahead, there would have been hundreds of arrests. And Dave in Aberdeen regarding Andrew, formerly Prince Andrew, of course. Good morning, Mark. I'm not a fan of Andrew, but I think the Americans should mark their own homework first. Lots to come, folks. So we've got so many big stories, including sectarian politics in this country. Will the genie ever go back in the bottle? And Reform UK. Is Nigel Farage, is he now Britain's Prime Minister-elect? Plus the front pages, Dolan's dispatch and much more. Keep it talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Top of the morning to you. It is coming up to 3 minutes past 7. It's Mark Dolan looking after the Morning Glory hot seat. A very big 3 hours to come. Hateful Britain, anti-Semitic chants and violence as Aston Villa beat Maccabi Tel Aviv in a half-empty stadium. Britain is now becoming a toxic hotbed of sectarian politics. So can the genie go back in the bottle? Meanwhile, as Tory legend and heroic chief Brexit negotiator Lord David Frost steps away from the Conservative Party, and with a new poll revealing that even tactical voting won't keep Nigel Farage out of number 10, are Reform UK officially Britain's next government? Meanwhile, Tony Blair blasts Labour's employment rights legislation. I'll get reaction live in the studio from a man who's furious about this job-wrecking policy. Live in the studio, one of Britain's best-known and most successful entrepreneurs, Charlie Mullins. Now, a year ago, deportations were politically impossible. Well, I'll be joined by the man who's helped make the idea of flying foreign criminals out of the country a mainstream policy. Rupert Lowe, live after 9. And if she raises taxes, is Rachel Reeves' political career over? I'll be asking one of the country's best connected political journalists. And the bad headlines keep coming for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor as he's ordered to appear before Congress over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Should he go to America and clear his name? And in today's Dolan's Dispatch at 8 o'clock, you won't want to miss this. The BBC stands accused of political bias. Well, I'll be dealing with our beleaguered national state broadcaster in no uncertain terms. The BBC, that costs us almost £180 a year, doesn't even know what a woman is. It thinks that someone that's pregnant is a pregnant person. And they've just punished the newsreader who does know the truth and knows that you've only got women and men, you can't have one or the other, and that pregnant people are in fact pregnant women. So what a hot mess the BBC are. It's becoming Britain's weakest link. That is today's Dolan's Dispatch at 8 o'clock. Do you know something? It might get me cancelled. Good. What do you think about the BBC? Is it time to defund? Should we get rid of the licence fee? 0344 499 1000. Have you stopped paying the licence fee? Let me know why. Give me a call. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Of course, you can listen to us on the radio as you go about your busy morning, getting the kids their breakfast in their stomach and getting yourself ready for work. Whatever you're up to today, you can hear us on the radio. You can also watch us. Just head to YouTube and search Talk. And as the saying goes, let's talk. Let's have a look at tomorrow's front pages today. And here we go with the Daily Mail, first of all. What double standards? BBC newsreader broke rules by pulling a face because her script said pregnant people, but bosses don't seem to care that Panorama doctored Donald Trump's speech. One of the few hits that the BBC have at the moment is The Traitors, and it looks to have been won by the comedian Alan Carr. Ruthless Alan Carr, crowned winner of Celebrity Traitors. Daily Express, end the gang's inquiry dither and delay. Grooming gang survivors fear that the government's national inquiry is less about the truth and more about a cover-up, according to Nigel Farage. The Guardian, Lucy Powell in challenge to Rachel Reeves over tax plans, which is the same story in The Eye. Labour splits at the top as new deputy leader tells Reeves, don't raise income tax and break the public's trust. Well, I think, unfortunately, folks, that ship may have passed. The Sun newspaper, ex-prince told to help probe. Tell us what you know, Windsor. Andrew is summoned to US Congress. Quiz over his links to Epstein. Daily Mirror, top traitor, Alan Carr wins hit show, and Andrew scandal, new twist, summoned is the headline. The Times newspaper, cabinet ministers accuse Lammy of cowardice over prison release, and income tax will go up, Rachel Reeves tells Watchdog. Why can't she tell us? Why does she have to do it with obfuscation and hints? We know what's coming, folks. We're basically running the economy into the ground as a result of this Labour government, and things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. Let's get reaction to the big stories of the day with the political commentator and broadcaster, a very old friend of mine, Benedict Spence. Benedict, top of the morning to you.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm very, very well indeed, and a major headache for the BBC. Look at this front page in the Telegraph today. Davey must explain or quit, says Johnson. Boris Johnson has led calls for Tim Davey, the BBC's Director General, to explain or resign over the bias scandal engulfing the broadcaster. Your reaction?
I think it's been a long time coming, ultimately. It's been a sort of a slow beginnings of an avalanche for the BBC, and now we're beginning to see, obviously also with the Martin Croxall story, an example of several cases where actually, you know, what the BBC thinks is perfectly acceptable behaviour is just not in line with what the public expects from its state broadcaster, especially seeing as everybody's having to sort of pay through the nose for this sort of thing. When it comes to Tim Davies' position, I suspect he won't resign, but certainly senior people have to answer for this. It's unacceptable that this sort of thing can be allowed to, excuse me, carry on going, and there not be very significant repercussions higher up. And I think also there need to be questions, therefore, about the way in which different departments conduct themselves. I mean, what's going on at Panorama, BBC Verify might be another one where perhaps questions should be asked about what it is that these people, what these so-called journalists, to pardon the pun, get up to on their spare time on the taxpayers' money. And we do need to remind ourselves of that. It is illegal for people to consume any kind of televisual media of any sort without paying the fee to fund this sort of thing.
Most definitely. A lot of messages coming in about this current government. Good morning, Mark, says Sean. The Labour Party sleaze, corruption, incompetence is utterly relentless. Blair started all of the problems we have today, and things have got steadily worse under Keith Starlin and his mob, who have supercharged the lunacy. We now punish victims and treat criminals like royalty. We have no borders. Public services have failed. We're bankrupt, etc., etc., etc. And woke ideology has infected everything. The change we now need is massive and needs to be soon, or we are truly finished. LIBOR must go, says Sean. Well, Sean may get his wish in 3 or 3.5 years' time, with a new poll suggesting that even with tactical voting against reform's best interests, Nigel Farage becomes Britain's next Prime Minister.
I think on current trajectory that is certainly the case, and I think frankly you can see why. Honestly, the fact that you've now got a situation where the Green Party might be conceivably outpolling Labour nationally, or at least going toe-to-toe with them, should be a sign of simply how catastrophic this Labour government has been. And of course, lots of people on the left will point to that and say, but then therein lies the possibility for some sort of left-wing coalition. But it's not going to be that. This is going to be in sort of very die-hard Labour areas in the south of England, around London, and what have you, where that sort of support is really manifesting, if anywhere. These aren't going to be the sorts of seats that somebody like Reform is going to be targeting at all. It's still a very long way off, and I think we need to remember that there's still every possibility that something changes. But equally, as Nigel Farage himself thinks, something could happen to sort of precipitate this election happening much sooner. The problem with that is, in the economic sort of disaster zone that I think would herald that in, a lot of people would be very badly hurt as a result of the policies of this government. So it's a difficult thing. Do you want to wait 3.5 years and things sort of stay as bad as they are now? Or do you want to speed run the whole thing and people get very, very badly burned in the short term just to facilitate a change of government in the long term?
Why are so many people being released accidentally from prison under this Labour government? The numbers have noticeably jumped in the last 12 months.
Oh, for a laugh. No, I mean, it's honestly, we should laugh at this because, frankly, what else are you going to do if not laugh and cry? But of course, this is a very serious thing. You know, these are not, sort of very petty criminals that are being released. It is a high-profile issue, and it sort of flies in the face, frankly, of suggestions that Labour are getting tough on the prison system and that they're working particularly hard to overcome the legacy issues of the Conservative Party, of which there were many. This is, I think, simply down to the fact that the prison system and the Ministry of Justice more broadly, suffers the deepest of cuts when it comes to spending cuts. Not things like welfare or anything like that. It's prisons, it's law and order, which is the exact opposite way around that it should be. But, I think we also have to juxtapose this against a series of stories over the last however many years it is, of, for instance, large amounts of drugs being smuggled into prisons, of prison staff having affairs with prisoners, of prison staff being affiliated to organizations that are known to prisoners on the inside. Very clearly, there has been a catastrophic breakdown at multiple levels of how our prisons are run. And if you want to know the answer as to why it is that people are now being accidentally released, therein probably lies your answer. Incompetence.
Most definitely. Well, listen, that's not something you're guilty of. Benedict will catch up again very soon. One of my favourite journalists there, Benedict Spence, a political commentator who has raised this issue of people being released under this Labour government from prison accidentally. Those numbers have jumped. What is going on? Well, certainly what's not helping the matter is the Deputy Prime Minister, the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, is in charge. Mastermind he is not. Now, lots of messages coming in. Joanna in Salisbury, good morning, Mark. Martine Croxall, the BBC newsreader, got vilified for saying pregnant women. Well, a few years ago, she was not in trouble for cheering whilst reading the news that Boris Johnson had resigned. Two-tier justice from the BBC. We're going to be discussing more issues around the BBC in today's Dolan's Dispatch. Cliff in Berkshire says, good morning, Mark. I was amused last night when I heard someone rename BBC Verify as BBC Justify. Much more appropriate, in my opinion. And we'll be joined by Rupert Lowe at 9 a.m. today. On deportations, Phil in Coventry says, good morning, Mark. Regarding mass deportation, we absolutely need to do this. Start with the 40,000 plus on the terror watch list, then all of the hate preachers. Completely stop all illegal immigration, then only let in people who respect our values, have something of value to offer, and are self-supported. Peaceful British people of all ethnicities have had enough. Phil, I agree with you there. And I think that if Reform do win the next election, they will be swept to power on a multi-ethnic vote. You heard it here first. Lots more to come. Has Britain turned into a hotbed of sectarian hate? We'll discuss that next.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
7:19, kind words about the show from Sharon, and thank you for that. Keep it coming. Send the word talk and your message to 87222. Mark, Amanda says, the anti-Semitism in this country is only going to get worse. The government is actively encouraging the hate by blatantly incentivising it. Good morning, Mark, says Barry. You can watch The Traitors every day by tuning into the Parliament channel. Well put. Thank you for the truth, says Bits of Glitz. And how about this from, let's have a look, another person that's texted in the show this morning. Good morning. For the longest time, I kept saying I'm going to cancel my BBC licence fee. Well, to be honest, we don't watch a lot of TV anyway, but I never really got round to cancelling my BBC licence. But after the death to the IDF at Glastonbury Festival, and that hideous display of anti-Semitism, I said enough is enough and cancelled it the very next day, and have never felt more liberated. I absolutely refuse to pay towards the salaries of hateful anti-Semitic people at the BBC. What about this from Marco in Swindon? I cancelled my TV licence 4 years ago because I simply do not agree with the agenda and narrative of the organisation. I also don't agree with the massive salaries and pay packets that the directors are getting. I simply phoned up TV licensing and told them that I do not watch the BBC and I do not watch any live broadcasts by the BBC. I only watch internet subscription services, and the guy on the phone was absolutely fine and cancelled my licence. I urge everyone to do the same. Listen, let me know your thoughts about that. Are you still paying the licence fee? If so, is it worth the money? Have you cancelled? If so, why? 0344 499 1000. Tommy's on the phones today. Book your call on the show. But let's have a look at this front page story in The Telegraph. Oliver Brown, their sports writer, discrimination wins on shameful night at Villa Park. 11 arrests, fireworks thrown and death to the IDF chanted. And how about this from Jake Wallace-Simons, the former editor of the Jewish Chronicle. British Islamism is flexing its muscles more and more openly as it rises to power. Let's get reaction now from the former government advisor on political violence and disruption, Lord Walney. Lord Walney, welcome to Morning Glory.
Good morning.
What's your reaction to the scenes that played out last night in Birmingham?
Appalling, Mark. Truly shameful. And it is a stain on our country that you had Israeli Jewish people who were banned from that match, and yet you saw the hatred on our streets, on the streets of the UK's second largest city. Seeing Asian men covered in quasi-military garb, head to foot in black, with their identities covered, chanting. Effectively wanting to hunt down Jewish people on the street is it's frightening, and it shows just how far, I'm afraid, we have allowed problems in our communities to fester without the political world waking up to just how bad things are.
Why is sectarian politics like this such a problem in our democracy?
Well, what you have I'm afraid, too many communities across the UK is a almost complete, or very significant at least, segregation between Muslim communities and much of the and the rest of the population in areas, and I'm afraid that that strand of intolerance has been shown through this football match, which has it has only, I'm afraid, the most unconvincing of veneers of being about hooliganism or football. It's about a hatred, a visceral hatred of Israel, which is completely out of proportion and very different to people's views on any other conflict. And it's driven by a level of anti-Semitism, which we have turned a blind eye to in the UK, and we've ended up in this pass. And I hope that the one thing that will happen from how hideous the scenes were in Birmingham last night is that it will be a wake-up call to people who have bluntly, wanted to pretend that this hasn't been happening in our communities, and it will force the political mainstream to actually look at why we have such problems of hatred and such segregation in our communities and seek to try to do something about it.
And the threat of last night's scenes go beyond the Jewish community, who make up perhaps 300,000-400,000 people in this country. The Jewish community are, unfortunately, not for the first time in history, the canaries in the coal mine of a free society, aren't they?
Yes, that's right. And I thought Jake Wallace-Salmons in the Telegraph this morning puts it very well, to say, look, we effectively don't think the rest of Britain that you are going to be excluded from this. The people who are masking up and angrily chanting death to the IDF from the river to the sea, showing their naked hatred, they don't just hate Israel and Jewish people, they hate the West. They hate the values of the country in which they are living, and has, because of our own British values of acceptance and tolerance, they hate the values of their own country. And that is something that I don't think that Britain cannot seek to prosper and strengthen itself for all of the challenges that we have ahead unless we fully understand how damaging that is and have a strategy to try to tackle it.
How did we get here, Lord Walney? Are the hateful scenes that we've seen, not just in Birmingham, England's second city last night, but on the weekly so-called peace marches, how did this happen? Is it a consequence of unchecked mass immigration?
Look, I think that immigration is clearly part of this, and where we have been accepting people coming over to our country is also an issue. And I think that different kinds of immigration and people coming from different areas brings very different results. Yeah. Much of Britain has been strengthened over the decades by immigration, but when you have an influx of people from conservative Muslim nations and with a level of perhaps of experience of recent conflict, this is colouring too much of what we see. And I think added to that, it's not simply a question of who comes to Britain, it's what happens when they are there. And I think in previous waves of immigration in previous decades, you've had actually people coming to this country wanting to be part of a British project,
yes,
actually getting dogs abuse while they were there, but actually wanting to be part of Britain. And what you are seeing now, I think, in too many communities, with like people leading completely separate lives, and parts of the streets of towns and cities in England simply not looking recognisable as a part of our country, does have a real part in fueling this problem. It's bluntly what much of the public have been telling the political mainstream, people such as myself, for a long time, and we have refused to listen, but we have to listen now.
Indeed, and of course at the election in July of last year, we saw 5 independent pro-Gaza MPs enter the House of Commons. This sort of sectarian politics is going to grow. Where could that leave us in a decade or two's time?
Yeah, I think we are, unless we can properly grip this, on a track of much greater division in the country, because those independent MPs have had a level of success. There is a significant possibility that will greatly increase both in national and in local elections. Meanwhile, you are having other sections of our population, those white Brits in what is now increasingly accurately being called the red wall seats in parts of just thoroughly angry and annoyed, going to the margins of politics, and us fueling a sense of anger and division and grievance from all sides, rather than where we need to be as a country, where we are in Britain, is when Britain's at its best, is being able to bring people together around the liberal parliamentary democracy that we are still lucky to live in. So this is an inflection point for our country, and this is a moment for political leadership.
Indeed. Will we get, briefly, Lord Wolney, if you can, will we get that leadership from Sir Keir Starmer? Has he got a grip on this? What levers can be pulled, and can the genie go back in the bottle?
Well, I'm actually optimistic, hopeful that Shabana Mahmood, as the new Labour Home Secretary, has a deep understanding of this. She is a Muslim herself, but she has been challenged and intimidated, and tried to face a level of intimidation from these Islamist thuggish gangs, and can have a capacity to speak about this to the centre and the left, which others have shied away from. So look, this is a very difficult thing, and I think the Labour Party is at best, the jury is out as to whether it has the stomach and the courage to do this. But there are people, I think, within the Labour Party who understand how perilous this moment is, and really that unless they themselves can grip this, they face being thoroughly rejected by voters at the next election. So look, I'm choosing to be an optimist about this, because otherwise you wake up this morning and you feel pretty dismal about your country. But we have to try and do something.
Lord Wolney, a real pleasure to have you on the show. My thanks to former government advisor, ex-Labour MP and an expert on political violence and disruption, Lord Wolney. Well, the brilliant talk reporter Nick Ellaby was at Villa Park last night. And Nick, what did you see?
Oh, good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
I definitely, I saw, I think, probably quite a good result for West Midlands Police in the end. We had, we had reports before last night that we might see up to 20,000 people on the streets of Birmingham outside Villa Park protesting against Israeli sports teams playing in international competition. I spoke to a father of a local school child near Villa Park, and he told me that the primary school had told the parents they were expecting 20,000 people to attend that pro-Palestinian rally outside Villa Park. But in the end, I think it was probably about 800 people. The crux of the protest was, one, to show solidarity with people in Palestine, and two, to call for, as I mentioned, Israel to be kicked out of international competition. They don't want Israeli teams playing in FIFA competitions, UEFA competitions. And then I did hear chants of death to the IDF. There were 11 arrests. One 21-year-old man for allegedly trying to throw fireworks into the ground, into Villa Park. I did see a bit of a clash just before kickoff with Aston Villa fans in the Holt end, where all the sort of fanatical fans sit, and then protesters on the road. There's a gap in the corner of that stadium. I did see a bottle thrown as well, and kind of fans and pro-Palestinian protesters goading each other. There was also a little bit of a clash around half-time when the fans came out into the smoking areas. And then the rest of the arrests were one young man for not removing a face covering, a 17-year-old boy for failing to comply with a dispersal order, one for a breach of the peace, and 5 racially aggravated public order offences. But it was interesting, just before kickoff, we had that interview that came out on Sky News with Chief Superintendent Tom Joyce of the West Midlands Police, who revealed the information we've been trying to get hold of for the last 3 weeks, is that the reason they banned Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from attending the game was the threat of hooliganism from a subset of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. He said not all Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, but a subset of them. And it was also information intelligence from police in Amsterdam after there was kind of pitched battles between Maccabi fans and Ajax fans last November. So in the end, I think it was, I mean, there were 700 police and probably almost one policeman for every pro-Palestinian protester. The other side of the ground, people showing solidarity with British Jews, quite a small march. They were kind of escorted from the train station to the ground, probably about 80 people or so, and they were kept well away from the pro-Palestinian demonstrators on the other side.
Well, Nick, stellar work over the last 24 hours. I know that what you'd like to be doing is covering the football, but it's become a political story. But
exactly.
really enjoyed your coverage of this important occasion. My thanks to Talk reporter Nick Ellaby, who was at Villa Park last night. By the way, up the Villa, congratulations on a football result. Don't forget that the beautiful game is part of that conversation. But next up, speaking of conversations, wait for this, folks. We need an item on the show called You Couldn't Make It Up. Migrants are successfully claiming asylum on the grounds that they are pensioners and should see out their lives in Britain. Too old and too lonely to deport. Now, don't forget, at 9 o'clock, we'll be joined by Rupert Lowe, who has a major plan for deportations if he can influence the next administration. But next up, we'll discuss this story and rising tensions around immigration. Don't go anywhere.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
7:38, top of the morning. This is Morning Glory. Mark Dolan with you until 10. Rupert Lowe live on the show at 9 a.m. to talk about the logistics of deportation flights. And in just 20 minutes' time in Dolan's Dispatch, I'll be dealing with the incredibly biased BBC in no uncertain terms. You won't want to miss it. That's Dolan's Dispatch in 20 minutes' time. It might get me cancelled. Good. But what about this for a story? Migrant pensioners are too old and too lonely to deport. Meanwhile, national pride has plummeted and society is more divided than ever in Keir Starmer's Britain, a major study has found. In findings which will send alarm bells ringing in Downing Street, 8 in 10 people said they felt the nation was divided, up 5 percentage points from 2 years ago and 10 points from 2020. Half of the public said that Britain's culture was changing too fast. Worryingly for the Prime Minister, Reform UK voters, many in Labour's traditional heartlands, were most worried about the cultural state of the nation, suggesting that Nigel Farage's Reform UK stand to make big gains at the next election. This was all down to research from King's College London and pollsters Ipsos. Let's get reaction now from social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Rakib, do the public's concerns around immigration and our rapidly changing society surprise you?
Absolutely not, Mark. I think that when what we have seen in recent years is unprecedented levels of immigration, the so-called Boris wave. And many of the migrants originating from countries characterized by religious fundamentalism, hotbeds of sectarian strife and communal conflict. And on top of that, we have the ongoing small boats emergency, which in my view poses a fundamental threat to female public safety. So we have an utterly dysfunctional asylum system. And what we have seen in recent years, Mark, is a massive demographic change. And with that come cultural anxiety. So many of these findings aren't really a surprise to me. And I think it is a shame, though, that cultural anxieties are on the rise, because that very much suggests that much of the British public, they really crave a sense of stability and belonging.
Well, definitely, there is a crisis, isn't there, in Britain's multicultural experiment. You know, the UK is a multi-ethnic country, not necessarily an issue, but divided communities, people living parallel lives, not speaking the language, not following the rule of law, sometimes not active in the economy. That is definitely a failure. How do we fix it, Rakib?
Oh, where would you start? I think first
making you Prime Minister. You're a very wise man.
Right. Well, firstly, we need to get the fundamentals right when it comes to our immigration system. That needs to be defined by quantity and quality control. At the moment, we don't have either of those. I think we need to see asylums. We need to see the end of the small boats emergency. And if that means looking at a relationship with the ECHR, withdrawing from it, then that needs to be done. If we need if that requires, or rather that results in having actual sovereignty over our national borders, then that's what's required. But I think crucially we need to have a very strong debate in terms of what needs to be done within our country. I think many of the problems are very much homegrown. And I think that in recent times we've almost become a heartland of Islamist extremism, to the point that there's a Muslim majority countries in the world who think that we're a soft touch when it comes to that threat. So I think that's a very serious problem. But I think more generally, I think there's a culture of self-flagellation here, which has taken root, especially within so-called progressive institutions. I think there needs to be a greater sense of pride and protectiveness over our national heritage, history and traditions. Now, when we look at British history being vilified, very few people even mention that we played a pioneering humanitarian role in suppressing the Atlantic slave trade. When it comes to anti-racism, I think of the 1862 Manchester mill workers who refused to work with cotton in solidarity with US slaves, or the Battle of Bamber Bridge, where you had Lancastrian working-class pub landlords rejecting American commanders' demands to introduce a colour bar in the village during the Second World War. So if I need inspiration in terms of anti-racism, I don't need to look to BLM, I just look at radical English history. So I think there's many things that we can do, but at the moment we're not even there yet.
No. Is there the political will in Downing Street to tackle this, do you think?
I don't think, unfortunately, I think under this current government, I think the problem with this current government, there's no philosophical grounding to begin with. And I think that's demonstrated by the number of U-turns it's done in a very short period of time being in government. And I think that's a key problem. You need a government which has a very clear idea of how it wants to govern the country, but also how it feels about the country, its history, its heritage, its traditions. And I think it needs to have that instinct of really understanding where the mainstream public lies when it comes to those kind of issues, those very important cultural issues. Now, of course, economic management is key, and addressing this things such as the cost of living crisis, especially when you look at energy bills, that's essential. But I think people also care about what I would consider to be, what is the cultural preferences of the government of the day. And at the moment, I think that the current Labour government doesn't truly represent many of these anxieties and concerns over cultural issues which are present within the British public.
Briefly, Rakib, if Nigel Farage wins the next election, I think what you'll see is an end to the illegal boat crossings and a drastic reduction in legal net migration, particularly from countries that don't share British values. That's fine. But how do you deal with the people that don't share our values that are already here, many of whom are British citizens who can't be deported?
Well, I think that it's very clear that when it comes to Islamist extremism, I think for too long we've been a soft touch. I thought it was very interesting. The recent Prevent figures were published yesterday, and it showed that only 10% of the referrals to Prevent were Islamist. Now, that doesn't match the broader terror threat picture in the country at large.
That's right. Apparently Prevent are very focused on far-right extremism, whatever that is.
No, and I think that the point here is that if any government really wants to secure genuine cultural change in the country and the kind of problems that you're referring to, they're going to have to look at the institutions, they're going to have to look at the civil service. Because I think without those, without securing cultural change within those institutions, root and branch reform, then they're not going to make much headway. So the challenges are huge. We shouldn't question that.
Rakib, great to see you again. Dr. Rakib Ehsan, social policy analyst, who says things must change, but likely won't do under this current administration. Next up, Labour's plans to strengthen workers' rights are up in smoke, with Labour grandee Sir Tony Blair saying they will cost jobs and destroy the economy. I'll get reaction live in the studio from one of Britain's best known and most successful entrepreneurs. Charlie Mullins is live next.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It is 7:50. You're listening to Morning Glory. Mark Dolan with you till 10 o'clock. Live at 9, we'll talk deportations with Rupert Lowe. How much will it cost? And is it legally possible? Could the blob stop it in the event of a future administration? And in 10 minutes' time in Dolan's Dispatch, I'll be dealing with the incredibly biased BBC in no uncertain terms. The BBC is becoming Britain's weakest link. That is Dolan's Dispatch. In 10 minutes' time, it might get me cancelled. Good. So 7:50, lovely to have your company. Let's talk about a major headache for this government. Labour's plans to strengthen workers' rights risk harming jobs and hurting growth, according to Sir Tony Blair, no less. The former Prime Minister's think tank said controversial day one protections against unfair dismissal would make it more expensive and risky to hire workers. The Tony Blair Institute said the extreme reforms threaten to undermine a critical strength of the British economy, eroding business confidence to hire and ultimately undermining growth. Well, let's get reaction from a man that knows all about growth. He's set up several successful companies. He is Charlie Mullins, OBE. Charlie, lovely to see you again.
Good morning, Mark.
You had huge success with Pimlico Plumbers, and now you're back with WeFix.
WeFix London, yeah.
And you're basically starting in the capital. You're going to go national, and you're probably going to overtake Pimlico at some point, aren't you?
Undoubtedly. Yeah, things are going very well for WeFix London at the moment. The only thing that can mess it up, I think, is Labour government with their workers' rights, if I'm being honest. For me, it's going to be such a disaster to give somebody, rights from the first day they get there. You know, they can... You get rid of them next day, you can do you for unfair dismissal. I mean, it's crazy if you think about it, Mark, because you have to give people a trial and work out whether you want them or you don't. But I think here you're going to get people get a job that don't really want it and then walk out the next day and then start having a scream up. So it's a crazy idea. I'm surprised that they need a think tank to come up with the idea. I mean, this was... predictable, when they sort of come up with this idea, they're going to change it. And I think it was Rayner that come up with the idea that now they're obviously going to try and pass it through Parliament, which they will get it passed because they've obviously got the votes.
Yeah.
House of Lords are having a scream up at the moment because anybody with any common sense at all will know it's a total disaster to bring in. I mean, the worst one they can bring in is workers' rights from day one. I mean, employers don't want to get rid of people. The idea is we want to employ more people. So it costs us money to have to get rid of them. But this is just, I would say it's probably the worst thing I've ever heard in workers' rights.
Yes, because if someone comes and works for you, there's a probation period to make sure that you're right for them and that they're right for you.
Of course.
And you could get someone that's incompetent and lazy and you fire them after one day, and like you said, you can face a tribunal, which is a major headache and a major cost for particularly a small business.
Well, yeah, employers just won't take the chance. You will not take the chance of that you can't get rid of somebody. And, they all come across in the interview well, and then they get to work, and then they're slomming all over the desk, some of these people.
Yeah, because sometimes you've met people, I mean, you've got a good eye for talent, but you'll have employed someone that was impressive in the interview and turned out to be a dud. It must happen.
Well, it happens, but I don't slip up that often myself.
Right.
You're joking. I mean, you know, they stick out like a sore thumb to me. But on saying that, some people can be very deceiving. It's unfair for the employer to have to be under that pressure. So as a business owner, you're going to employ less people, you're going to take less chances, and many businesses, again, will close down because of it, because they're not going to replace staff. You cannot take the chance of having somebody with you and they're no good or they're not what you want. I mean, you've got... Look, I think at the moment it's a 2-year probationary before they get the rights. How can you go from 2 years to 1 day? I mean, maybe common sense, maybe a year or something before you get to probably know somebody. But it will get implemented, and, you know, Rayner, who's come up with the idea, she's never employed anybody in her life, and she probably never will. And would we really take any notice of what she come up with?
I think that's unfair. She's kept a few estate agents busy, but that's another story, isn't it? Also, this would be sickness benefits as well, bereavement leave, enormous costs on companies. And it's my understanding that when there are unfair dismissal claims, quite often companies just settle because it's easier than having a long tribunal and a legal process.
You're exactly right. I mean, as I say, you're 1-0 down if you go tribunal. All the costs, all the expense, but it's the, you know, the upsetting it causes on the company, but it's going to
company time.
There's so much against it. I mean, so if they had any common sense at all, they wouldn't even think of it. There's other ideas they're coming up with which they want to implement, and yes, I think it's fairness in the workplace. Of course it is, but it's unfair to the employer to have to put up with that pressure with somebody. And you know, I'm a great believer, if you don't want that person or not suitable for your business, they've got to go, haven't they?
So what's going to happen to the economy, to unemployment?
Well, the economy will crash. The economy will crash even worse. More and more business people or job creators, investors will leave the country, that's for sure. You know, I've already left, thank God. Yeah. And the business I have is in, you know, in the family business, and they comply with all the UK tax regulations. But the only thing that could take We Fix London out of business is Labour with their employment law changes and what they want to implement.
What are your thoughts about the wider direction of the country, including current levels of illegal and legal immigration?
Right, OK, I need to be careful there. We need to put a stop on it. I mean,
by the way, you don't have to be careful on my watch. If you can say what you think, because talk is the home of common sense.
Oh, well, I say, OK, well, look, we need to, you know, stop allowing them in the country. We need to get rid of as many as we can. We need to cut our spending down. I think Rachel Reeves trying to bring money in on taxing more working people and making life more difficult. But if she cuts the spending down, we need to put a stop on them immediately and deport all of them that arrived in the last 2 years. And I think you'll find...
Would that be legal and illegal?
Well,
would it be both?
Do we need them here? I mean, if they're not working, do we need them here? I mean, I don't believe we did. The job market is going down. More and more people are unemployed. We just don't need them here. I mean, as simple as that. You know, yes, people are going to be bellyaching this morning that certain migrants are needed, but, you know, these are not the migrants that we need here. These people are coming here for one reason only, for benefits.
What do you make of this headline in today's Telegraph? Migrant pensioners too old and lonely to deport, judges rule. Migrants are successfully claiming asylum on the grounds that they're pensioners and should see out their lives in Britain.
Well, again, I think it's crazy, you know, that we don't look after our own people, we don't look after our own veterans. Why would you want to look after people that have came here and are poncing off the country? I mean, I'll be blunt with you, they're just ponces. You know?
How do you feel the country has changed since you set up your business as a young man, having left school at a young age?
Yeah, well, has it changed? I think there's no incentive now. I think you're being penalised. I mean, you know, to run a successful company or become wealthy or create jobs or to train people, you're like bad news, or what a terrible person. You know, he makes people work and he pays them well and he makes lots of money out of them. What a terrible person. So we've gone from a buzzing sort of nation that could get back to the top to, you know, work's a bad thing kind of thing. The biggest problem we got, Mark, is paying people for not doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, what do you make of the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer? Can he get on top of these problems facing the country?
No, not at all. I mean...
what's the problem with him?
Well, he's a waste of time. I mean, he's not a leader, he's a follower. I don't really think he's in the real world. He doesn't look like he's with it to me half the time. And
what do you mean by that? Doesn't look
well, he
like
don't
he's
look
with
like
it?
he's awake, does he? He looks like, you know, the lights are on but no one's there kind of thing. I mean, he was a wrong choice. I mean, the question I will say of him, Rayner, Reeves, Lammy, would you employ them? And the answer's no. And yet we're letting them run the country. So the quicker he goes, the quicker reform get in, and Nigel Farage is Prime Minister. That's the only hope I believe the UK's got.
So you've interviewed lots of people. You can spot talent a mile off. Is Nigel Farage a quality candidate for Britain's next Prime Minister?
Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly. There's nobody better out there at the moment than him.
Why do you say that? What are his qualities that attract you?
Well, his qualities are that he makes things happen. You know, he'll say something, he'll get it moving, and he doesn't put up with all the nonsense and all the woke people and all the weirdos that, you know, don't agree with getting things right. He's got common sense and he's got drive about him. And he will also work with business people, knowing that, you know, business people know how to run this country.
My thanks to Charlie Mullins, OBE. What a career, what a life. Charlie, come back and see us again soon. Next up, Dolan's Dispatch on the BBC.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, top of the morning, it is coming up to 3 minutes past 8. I am Mark Dolan. This is Morning Glory. A big 2 hours to come. Hateful Britain, anti-Semitic chants and violence as Aston Villa beat Maccabi Tel Aviv in a half-empty stadium. Britain is now becoming a toxic hotbed of sectarian politics. So can the genie go back in the bottle? Meanwhile, as Tory legend and heroic chief Brexit negotiator Lord David Frost steps away from the Conservative Party, and with a new poll revealing that even tactical voting won't keep Nigel Farage out of number 10, are Reform UK now officially Britain's next government? Now, a year ago, deportations were considered politically impossible and politically toxic. Well, I'll be joined by the man who's helped to make the idea of flying foreign criminals back to their home countries a mainstream idea. Rupert Lowe is live at 9. Don't miss it. And if she raises taxes, is Rachel Reeves' political career over? I'll be asking one of the country's best connected political journalists. And the bad headlines keep on coming for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he's ordered to appear before Congress over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Should he head to America to clear his name? Now, my priority for the next 2 hours is to get your opinions on the national television and radio airwaves. Book your place on the show. Give me a call now. Tommy's on the phones, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. And as the saying goes, let's talk. And we'll kick off the hour with today's Dolan's Dispatch. When Lord Reith created the BBC, he gave it a simple mission: to inform, to educate, and to entertain. Fast forward to 2025, and it does none of those things. In fact, the BBC does the opposite. Rather than inform, it misinforms. Rather than educate, it brainwashes. And as for entertain, well, the incredibly smug and incredibly left-wing Have I Got News For You proves that BBC comedy is quite simply no laughing matter. But what's more serious than that, what's even more serious, is a shocking expose by the Daily Telegraph newspaper which reveals outrageous bias in the corporation's coverage of current affairs, including a decision by producers of the flagship Panorama show to edit down a speech by Donald Trump on January the 6th, making it look like he told his supporters to go to the Capitol in Washington, D.C. and commit violence. Now, this was profoundly misleading because it removed the part of his speech in which he explicitly urged everyone to, and I quote, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Complete misinformation. Where is BBC Verify, the corporation's lamentable far-right obsessed fact-checking service, when you need it most? But I'm afraid that the Trump stitch-up is just the tip of the iceberg. Those good people at the BBC's Arabic channel were found to have been wildly anti-Israel and pro-Hamas in its reporting. But an anti-Israel bias is not new from the BBC, with its former director of television, Danny Cohen, describing the whole organisation as institutionally anti-Semitic. All of this comes from a leaked internal memo written by the incredibly brave Michael Prescott, a former independent advisor to the BBC's Editorial Guidelines and Standards Committee, who also called out the BBC's efforts at social engineering by peddling the madness of trans ideology and the idea that there are 100 genders and that men in women's changing rooms and child castration are examples of progress, whilst silencing the voices of those bad, dangerous people who think that there are just two sexes and that a man cannot become a woman. Now, the aforementioned BBC Verify, the corporation's Orwellian propaganda wing, are, without irony, accused of disinformation themselves after claiming that, wait for it, car insurance is racist. But this is the BBC whose woke staff think everything is racist, like merit, cottage cheese, mathematics, knitting and the countryside, whilst ignoring the actual racism of Hamas, who they still won't call terrorists. And surprise, surprise, our glorious BBC has been accused of rewriting British history to give it an anti-British, anti-colonial perspective, suffused in ideas like white privilege, with endless shows about slavery, none of which point out that we spent billions and lost lives ending. Well, I think this is the beginning of the end for the BBC. When 30 senior historians from Oxford, Cambridge and other top universities wrote to the corporation with their concerns about this fictional interpretation of our history, they were ignored. But of course they were, because the public have been ignored for decades. But this is the same BBC who ignored science, peddling a pro-lockdown, pro-vaccine narrative during COVID. I remember a character in EastEnders having a cup of tea in the cafe, and he was attacked for not taking the vaccine. He had concerns. Well, maybe his concerns were valid. Perhaps he thought that given he was young, fit and healthy, that statistically he didn't need the jab, and that given it didn't stop transmission, he was under no moral or medical obligation to risk the myriad side effects suffered by too many. Now, the BBC are clear that the vaccine saved lives, no problem. But this is the same organisation that stitched up those who chose not to take the vaccine, calling them a bunch of anti-vaxxer nut jobs in a horribly partisan, unbalanced documentary. And that is the theme of the BBC. Unbalanced, partisan, biased, social engineering, and peddling lies to the great British public for which we are paying a handsome sum. The BBC was wildly anti-Brexit, treating our newfound freedom after 2016 as a source of national shame and political problems that needed to be solved, not an opportunity to be embraced. During the Brexit negotiations, their correspondents on handsome six-figure salaries paid for by you and I sounded like they were on the side of the EU. Every night it was Brussels want this, Brussels want that. Not a word about what Britain wants. But this is an organisation with the word Britain in its name that hates its own country. Why else would they seek to axe Land of Hope and Glory from last night of the proms? And why would their breakfast TV hosts, again on handsome salaries paid for by you and I, sneer at a Conservative politician for standing in front of a flag of this country? This is the same BBC who continued to employ Gary Lineker after he compared the Rwanda plan to Nazi Germany and referred to October the 7th, the worst single attack on Jews since the Holocaust, as, and I quote, the Hamas thing. Only sharing an image of Jews as rats finally did for this awful man. This is the same BBC who continue to this day to employ Radio 5 live host Nihal Arthanaika, who said that he's triggered by working with white people and that working with white people affects his mental health. You couldn't make it up. Can you imagine if a white broadcaster said the same thing about colleagues of colour? Their feet wouldn't touch the ground. The BBC, much like the Labour Party, to whose woke, progressive, anti-British, anti-capitalist ideology it is allied, is now dominated by the leftist groupthink of metropolitan types in Islington, North London. That is where the BBC is at in 2025, which is why so many people are voting with their remote controls and their radio dials and with their wallet. Last year, 300,000 people stopped paying the licence fee, which of course is an obligatory tax if you use a TV, which goes up to £180 shortly. £180 for an organisation that this week punishes a newsreader, Martine Croxall, for refusing to call pregnant women pregnant people. She shouldn't be punished. She should be given a promotion. She's the only presenter on the BBC that knows what a woman is and that knows what the truth is. And the truth is that the BBC is done for. The BBC is fast becoming Britain's weakest link. Strictly speaking, they are stuffed. There are no masterminds there, only pointless celebrities. And how ironic that their most popular show at the moment is The Traitors, given that they are the traitors to this country? Your reaction, 0344 499 1000. I don't think that the licence fee is justifiable, and I think the BBC needs a rethink. Are you still paying the licence fee? Let me know, 0344 499 1000. Let's get reaction to concerns around bias at the BBC across a range of issues. In the company of the science documentary maker Malcolm Clark. Malcolm, welcome to Morning Glory.
Hi there, Mark. How are you doing?
Really good to have you. Very good. What is your assessment of impartiality at the BBC at the moment?
Well, I mean, I'm just appalled by the revelations, but I'm not surprised by them. I mean, I worked at the BBC. I used to make was one of the directors of the flagship science show Horizon. And in the old days, 2 decades ago, the BBC would churn out 20-hour-long episodes of Horizon every year. They now, I think the last time they made one was 3 years ago. So they've given up this whole area of science and investigation. And if I had been at Horizon now, I would have been arguing vociferously for them to cover the biggest medical scandal of our time, i.e. puberty blockers. And yet the BBC hasn't covered it. Only once did they cover it in Newsnight on a small item. A very good item. Otherwise, the BBC has been completely silent. It's impossible to imagine 2 decades ago that the biggest medical scandal of our time would not be covered by our national broadcaster. And yet, worse than not covering it, they actually worked, according to these revelations in the Telegraph, the journalists worked in league with their LGBT correspondents, whatever that is, to silence all debate, to push the trans angle on every argument about, say, women's sport or single-sex spaces or the big case at the Supreme Court. They worked, it's astonishing to think the journalists at the BBC worked in a conspiracy with these mad activists and with LGBT organisations to completely skew the national debate on these huge issues.
It's a deep, deep concern, isn't it? What's happened to the BBC? Why has it become so ideologically captured, whether it's being pro-Gaza, pro-trans, or back in the day, pro-lockdowns during COVID?
I mean, I can't speak about how the race and the anti-Semitism bias was instituted at the BBC. I do know, because I've written about it, because I helped set up an organisation called LGB Alliance, which was a gay organisation that was really worried about sort of the domination by the trans lobby of the whole sort of gay rights debate, and were really worried about puberty blockers. So I helped set that up, and I've been researching and been writing about the method by which Stonewall and other LGBT organisations captured institutions, including the BBC. And it's quite astonishing. In 2017, Stonewall and the BBC worked together and produced a diversity report. You can look in the internet, you'll see this diversity report, and they published it jointly. So this is a lobby group, Stonewall, highly contested, highly controversial, with an outrageous agenda. And they published, alongside the BBC management, a diversity report that had these targets for what would happen to the BBC over the next few years. One of them was that the staff group would work with editorial and would help improve coverage of LGBT issues, i.e. they would filter all the important debates to make sure the Stonewall argument was placed at the public's disposal, not anybody else's. And they worked with a staff group, and now, it's quite clear from the Telegraph's report, this staff group controlled, filtered, manufactured, and twisted the editorial output of the national broadcaster, which we're all paying for. I mean, it's quite outrageous.
Well, that's right. They're peddling an ideology which has seen male rapists accommodated in female prisons, male members of staff in NHS settings in a female changing room, the mutilation of children, irreversible puberty blockers. It's a litany of horrors, isn't it? Can the BBC be saved from this ideological capture?
I mean, obviously, it's hard. Everybody who works at the BBC has some sort of vestigial loyalty to it. There are a lot of great people in the organisation. It's a huge organisation. Local radio, the proms, the cultural and artistic stuff it does. But as for the news output, which is supposed to be central to the relationship with the British public, I think it's completely busted. It has to be, the whole news division has to be closed down, sold off, given to somebody who has any idea of what a fact is. I mean, take the LGBT part away. Just imagine that the national broadcaster of Britain completely silenced the debate about effectively the sterilisation of thousands of children, troubled children caught up in a social contagion. They've been taking these drugs, which are now banned, but the BBC has hardly ever mentioned this. Puberty blockers have been banned. Effectively, they sterilise teenagers, and yet this enormous scandal has hardly been covered by BBC News. So I think it's just a busted flush. I think the BBC's finished. I think Tim Davie is finished. Somebody, I mean, if we had a government that really cared about factual issues, they'd have come in, and Lisa Nandy, who unfortunately is also, signed up to all this woke nonsense, but Lisa Nandy would come in, close it all down, fire the entire management, and we would have an institution, the remnants of an institution with its cultural stuff that we could all sign up for. But the news stuff, I mean, you can't ignore the biggest medical scandal of our time and expect to survive.
Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us. Malcolm Clark is a science documentary maker. You'll find him on X, and let me tell you, it's well worth a follow. Mark says, Ronnie, what a bloody country I'm living in. I watched the scenes outside Aston Villa football ground, and you could be forgiven for thinking you were in Islamabad or Lahore. This is England. This is Birmingham, the second city. It looks more like an Islamic caliphate. Why on earth would the police allow demonstrations outside a football ground on match night? Oh yes, I forgot, they don't wish to upset the Muslim community. We presently have 6 million Muslims in this country, a small minority. What the hell will this country be like when their numbers reach 20 million? Paul in Fife. I'll get to more of your opinions on this, but what about this story coming up next? Migrants are successfully claiming asylum on the grounds that they're pensioners and should see out their lives in Britain. Migrant pensioners too old and too lonely to deport, says a top judge. We'll discuss that next.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It is 8:25 in the morning. It is Morning Glory. Mark Dolan with you until 10 o'clock. Rupert Lowe joins us at 9 o'clock to discuss the logistics of mass deportations. Could it happen under a reform UK government? And are you still paying the licence fee? 0344 499 1000. Mark says, Ian, I'm a big fan of the BBC and some of their undercover exposés are excellent. But doctoring the Trump speech and censoring Martine Croxall for using the correct term for someone who's pregnant undermines all the good things the corporation does. If you're going to criticise them for being woke, then you need to add the majority of the country's organisations and companies to that list. It's a very good point, Ian. Thank you for that. Keep those messages coming. Jan in Newcastle. Good morning, Mark. So now all the migrants coming in illegally on the boats will claim they're in their 60s instead of claiming they're under 16 due to this decision about not deporting pensioners. Can you make this up? Jan, you couldn't make it up. So this is a developing story. Migrants are successfully claiming asylum on the grounds that they're pensioners and should see out their lives in Britain. The headline in the Telegraph: migrant pensioners too old and too lonely to deport, judges rule. Let's get reaction from two good friends of mine, Chloe Dobbs and James Matthewson. Chloe Dobbs is a broadcaster and political commentator, and James Matthewson is a former Labour advisor. Great to see both of you. James, what do you make of that headline? Migrant pensioners too old and lonely to deport. Who cares?
Well, it's just not the fact of the case. It's what always happens whenever there's one court case. You end up with a headline, whether it be the Telegraph, the Express, the Mail, or even yourself, Mark. You end up running this headline about, this is now a mass kind of a reason why people will be getting... I mean, the amount of people who turn around their deportation status with a court case anyway, never mind the amount of people who then are actually deported from that, is a minority of a minority of a minority in the grand scheme of things. But when you hear this argument and it's put before a court and judges decide, that's a process, and it's a process that's important. And I don't understand how people can take issue. Look, you can take issue with the judge's ruling on anything. That's how judges work. And I do just think, unfortunately, that because we get into this conspiratorial way of thinking, which I've just heard on your previous guest talk about the BBC there, it sounded very conspiratorial. This idea that everybody's infected by this woke mind virus. Are the judges affected by it too? Is everybody kind of affected by it? Am I affected by it? Because I have no issue with somebody going to challenge legally a status and then being awarded a different decision based on evidence presented to a judge.
Are you seriously saying that the BBC is not in the grip of leftist groupthink?
Yeah, believe it or not, Mark, outside of the talkTV realm, the majority of us don't believe that nonsense.
But the BBC, very, very provably pro-Gaza in its coverage. The former director of television, Danny Cohen, has called the BBC institutionally anti-Semitic. They peddled a pro-trans agenda over a variety of their shows.
Pro-trans agenda,
and they rewrote British history.
No, the majority of us here, you see, in the real world, outside of the talkTV bubble, the majority of us have no issue with trans people. The majority of us have no issue with that. The LGB Alliance, as quoted by your previous guest, unfortunately are a very dangerous and anti-trans group. But, you know, I get it. You'll think that I'm one of these leftist people who's controlling the world as well. The reality is most people just aren't bitter, angry and full of hate. And that's the way the world is.
What's dangerous about a group that wants to make sure that if a lesbian goes on a date, she'll be going on a date with a biological woman and not find more than she bargained for?
You have no right to decide who... what the status of anybody is who goes on a date. You have no right to decide that. People get self-determination of their own lives. I thought you were a libertarian.
So a lesbian cannot select someone without a penis on a dating site.
What are we talking? Do you hear what you're talking about though? Like, this is the madness of this.
I'm giving you an example.
We're sitting at, like, you know, what is it, 8:30 in the morning, talking about whether lesbians can have penises. It's a complete distraction from any of the realities.
Well, it's not a distraction. It's an important matter of principle. Can a lesbian have a penis?
If you sit down with any trans person, you'll realise that asking questions like that's just a ridiculous thing to do.
Do you not think that lesbians should be able to select someone that hasn't got a penis when they go on a date?
Like, the fact... Do you not hear yourself, Mark? Like, you know, when you got...
I hear myself, and many thousands are hearing me on Talk Breakfast on Morning Glory.
Oh, no, it's a minority of the country, unfortunately. It's an extremist minority.
Are you throwing shade on my viewers and listeners, calling them extremists?
Dare, Mark. I wouldn't dare.
James, I'm sorry.
Chloe,
you are the one. So you guys are having a fun head-to-head there, but I'll get involved now. I'm sorry, but you are the one who's living in a bubble. You are the one who's part of an extremist minority. And the reason why you have this delusion that this is what the vast majority of people think is because it's this small minority of people who shout the loudest. They are the ones that are the keyboard warriors that are typing away online, talking about these issues and how we must allow men with penises to be in the women's bathrooms. It's their right. Okay, it's just a tiny minority. If you talk to the majority of people, the silent majority, right, they are going to completely disagree with you. And you've spoken about the BBC. Oh, it's just a few people who have a concern with the BBC. Why are there huge numbers of people cancelling their TV licenses then? That's not just a matter of the fact that people don't watch TV as much anymore. People are doing it in protest, huge numbers, not just a few people screaming and shouting online that are extremists. I'm sorry, but you are the one in a bubble, and I don't blame you for thinking that you are the majority, because it is easy to think that the majority of people think that a woman can have a penis when the people that shout the loudest are the people with this opinion. There are many people who are too scared to voice their opinion, but completely agree with Mark and I.
Well, it is interesting, Chloe, I must say. And, you know, I think you're an incredibly bright, articulate and talented person. But I do despair, and it breaks my heart. I'm saying that with all sincerity, that we've ended up in a situation where somebody like yourself, right, you're a graduate, you know, from Oxford, you're incredibly talented, has ended up on the side of the street opposite to 100 women's and girls charities who say that this nonsense that has been perpetrated by channels like talkTV, by GB News, by the Mail, the Express, all the usual suspects about migrants, you know, saying that they're a danger to women and girls when they ignore 90% of the violence committed against women and girls committed by white people, you know, in this country. It is just a very clear tactic to stoke racial tension.
Is it not a Okay, Chloe, do you want to take that?
Shame.
Yeah. Okay, so a few things there. So let me be clear. I am not someone who is of the view that if you stopped illegal migration, that suddenly rapes and sexual assaults would stop, that violence would stop, right? You are right that the majority of people who commit crimes like rape and sexual assault are white Brits, because that is the majority of the population there. But there is a huge proportionality issue, right? And anyone with a few brain cells can understand that. But some people they look at the figures and see, most crimes are committed by white Brits, therefore there's no issue whatsoever with people coming from certain cultures and certain countries. We know that people like Afghans and Eritreans are far more likely to commit rapes and sexual assaults. And the thing is, right, when it is frustrating, and also
this is what the left do. The left tell you it's not happening. This is gaslighting.
Listen, you can argue.
it's interesting
you can
how you
argue over, this particular stat, I'm not sure about the way that was calculated.
No, it's not. I'm sorry.
Use common sense. If you bring a bunch of men from a culture, Afghanistan, for example, has the worst record, ranked as the worst record in the world for its treatment of women and children. Do you not think if you brought a load of men from that culture that they might have different views about women and consent?
Obsessed again with
than your average Brit?
That we don't understand, Chloe. I mean, this is the problem.
Oh, we don't understand Afghanistan. You think Afghanistan's just like England in how they treat women?
Chloe, what I'm telling you here
is there a difference between how Afghanistan treat women and the UK treat women?
What I'm telling you here, well,
No
absolutely,
answer.
because the Taliban are in charge, of course. What I'm telling you here is, right, that we are facing a real pandemic across the globe, right, of violence against women and girls. It's despicable. And I know you're agreed on that. You know, I know that you understand, as you've said, that it wouldn't stop if you were to stop migration. I understand that. But my concern, Chloe, here is how somebody like you could end up siding with somebody like Donald Trump, Nigel Farage, people who supported and stand by sex offenders and rapists. Donald Trump himself is a rapist.
No, he's
and
not.
Yet you like
he's not a rapist, and he successfully sued a US TV network for calling him that. Can I just ask you briefly, though, James, the issue that people have got is that, yes, we have terrible people in this country. We have, homegrown criminals and rapists and God knows what else, and we must tackle that. The issue that the public have got is that we're importing people that commit these crimes. And that's why it's an aggravating factor, including people from Afghanistan who, according to the Office for National Statistics, are 21 times more likely to commit a rape than a British national. And you can sleep at night and not address that issue, can you?
Here's the reality, Mark, and I hate to burst the bubble. When I come in here and I come in these echo chambers like talkTV, like GB News, there's a reason that people are on that circuit and that you all talk the same talk and walk the same walk, and you think the BBC's woke and all the rest of it. You are not the majority view. Look, I'm not on Twitter anymore, and it does you the world of good.
Do you challenge the statistic that Afghan foreign nationals are 21 times more likely to commit a rape?
What I'm telling you,
are you denying that stat?
Mark, I'm making
because that's gaslighting.
Listen, platforms like X, that if you see the evidence that's just been done, Sky News have just done an excellent survey on X, and the amount of right-wing disinformation that you see on a platform like that. People are being shoved videos down their throat that aren't even real, that are AI generated. If you go out there on the streets of this country, you will not see the world that you are describing and the fear that you are mongering amongst
Well, look, it's all about opinions. I think this is what the left do. They gaslight, they tell you it's not happening, and then when they have to accept that it is happening, they tell you it's for your own good. But listen, it's all about opinions. Chloe and James are back after this, and next up is Nigel Farage. According to a new poll, he could be. Is he Britain's Prime Minister-elect? That's next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, I got a message from one of my many listeners to the show today. Mark, you might want to remind your socialist commentator with a strong northern accent that large swathes of northern England are being totally destroyed by migrants. Perhaps he should take a look at the streets of Hartlepool or Middlesbrough. Yeah, Birmingham wouldn't be bad last night either, would it? Which is in the grip of sectarian politics. How ironic that your leftist expert, says Kitty, thinks that those who don't agree with him are in a bubble and full of hate. His echo chamber of men dressed as women will implode as Britain becomes a caliphate and his ridiculous views are literally destroyed. Well, listen, I'm a big fan of James Mathewson because it's all about opinions on this show, and his are very valuable, as are Chloe Dobbs. They're both with us for the head-to-head. And Chloe, what about this brand new poll that suggests that not only will Reform UK win the next election, even if the other parties try to do tactical voting, Nigel Farage still becomes our next Prime Minister?
Yes, I mean, this is huge. I mean, they've led over 100 polls and counting in a row, and we had that mega poll suggesting they could even end up with 445 seats. But a lot of people, including me, looked at that mega poll and thought, well, that doesn't really take into account tactical voting. Probably isn't going to happen. But then when you see that even when tactical voting is taken into account, they're still on track to potentially win a general election. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing that it's crazy times we're living in, that this brand new party out of nowhere, people are so fed up with the tried and tested uni party that they're so willing to take a risk and try a new party. Now, of course, there always is an element of people on the day at the ballot box deciding, oh, I'm a bit nervous about trying someone new. I'm going to go for what I know. You see this with, for example, Tories thinking about switching to Labour for the first time if they're fed up with the Tories, but thinking I'll stick with what I know at the ballot box. So there might be an element of that. There could be a chance they have to make a coalition. But, you know, they've got several years. I mean, we don't know exactly when a general election is going to be, potentially 2029, but some people are saying 2027, including Farage, if the markets force it. But there's still plenty of time for them to gain even more and more support. And it really just shows how much people have completely lost trust in politicians and the main parties, that we've ended up in a situation where a party that only won 5 MPs just a year ago is now on track to win a general election. It's astonishing.
James, why are Reform UK ahead in the polls, do you think?
Oh, because every other option's terrible, isn't it? So, like, you're gonna support the option that looks the most credible to many people. People look for something in politics, and I think politicians often forget this. People are looking for authenticity, confidence. You know, they're looking for the people who believe in themselves often. Because if you don't believe in yourself, why should I believe in you as a voter? And I think when you look around, you look at the state of politics in general, for a very long time, you have just this uncertainty that clearly racks most politicians. They don't know what they're saying. Prime example of this, right? And I don't want to call her out because I worked with her, you know, for years. But Bridget Phillipson in the Labour Party, she's from Sunderland, born and bred. She's a great community politician and MP. But she was interviewed yesterday and asked about Zoran Mamdani in New York, and she didn't know what to say. So she pretended that she'd never heard of him on live TV.
Yeah.
I mean, how could you have not heard of Zoran Mamdani? It's all that's been in the headlines. So people look at it and they're like, yeah, of course that's nonsense. She doesn't want to clearly say what she thinks because she doesn't know what she thinks, because will Keir Starmer like it? Will the unions like it? Will our constituents like it? And it is that fear that grips most politicians. Nigel Farage doesn't have that. He just says what he thinks and he kind of cracks on, right? And I hate it. I disagree with everything the man says and stands for, but we don't have that conviction in any other option on the political table at the moment. People like Zach Polanski, perhaps, in the Greens, which, again, if you notice that poll, them shooting up for the same reason, I believe. But, you know, the Greens, I'm on the left, and I would struggle to vote for them at the moment because of their positions on things like NATO. So where do lefties like me go?
Well, James, it's a really good point. I think that you're a guy of keen intellect and deep moral principle. I think the reason why you're on the left is because you're concerned about inequality and a very unfair society, and particularly you're concerned about the plight of the poor. And so I think your best port of call might be Reform UK, who appear to be the one party that champions the cause of the working class. So, for example, they're going to scrap net zero, which will reduce energy bills, which are most impactful on the poor. They're going to end illegal immigration, which will save the country around £10 billion a year and reduce competition for resources upon which the poor rely. And they're going to cut taxes in order to grow the economy. With economic growth, you can give that to poor people. So I think you need to wear a turquoise rosette, James.
I don't look good in turquoise, Mark, unfortunately. Otherwise, I might consider it. But here's the thing, right? If you believe that, that's the big question here. If you believe that,
well, those are all policies of Reform UK. If you cut net zero, you're gonna bring down energy bills. That's great news for poor people.
I would argue that the person who's most terrified about those polls, about their success, is probably Nigel Farage, because you know what that spells for Nigel? It spells the end of a political career spent on the sidelines, chirping in, always being right, always having an alternative option. Government's a very different thing. And look at the way they're running councils right now. They are embroiled in stupid things like taking down pride flags when they could be delivering for local constituents. So I think the delivery aspect of that is a completely different kettle of fish. I don't want it to be an experiment, by the way. I don't think we can afford that as a country. But it will be interesting to see what happens. But let me tell you, if people vote for a Reform government, they'll never vote for them again. It'll be the same as they did with the Labour government the last time. It's a one-trick pony.
That's interesting. Chloe, do you think Nigel Farage doesn't want to be Prime Minister?
I think that he definitely does want to be Prime Minister. I mean, one thing that you've pointed out, James, is that the one thing that Nigel has that other politicians don't is conviction and honesty. And so when he says, I want to leave this country... Well, no, but he says what he thinks, right? Yeah. He says what he thinks, if that's a better way to put it. He says what he thinks, and I think that him and the team around him, they are very, very clear that they are determined to have the keys to number 10 after the next general election, and they are working insanely hard. I mean, not just Nigel Farage, but people like Zia Youssef, who have put a lot of work into to organise the party. It was just a few people running the show a year ago, and now they've got a huge team. They've got branches all across the country, and it is early days. And so I'm glad that they've got some time to prepare themselves before the next general election. And it will be important that at a local council level that they are able to show that they can be effective. There are a lot of difficulties with the councils simply not having the powers for them to do what they want to do with them. I think a lot of people agree with the taking down of pride flags and whatnot, but it can't just be that, right? They have to actually deliver on the day-to-day things that matter for local people, so they show that they can have good local councillors and good local MPs. It's a hard task, and when you say, James, people we can't have an experiment, I think people, they are so sick of the uni party that they're willing to take that risk. They're willing to take a chance because they think we've got nothing left to lose. If we vote in the Tories or Labour again, it's just we're going to end up in this horrible doom loop that never seems to end. So why not give it a go? If it's really bad, well, can it really be that much worse than the Tories and Labour?
James, briefly, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the core problem here in the country, is that for too long, kind of our standard politicians have taken people for granted, and they've not realised when people have said, "Look, my life is desperate. There's no hope. There's nothing to keep going for. It's an immense struggle. Everything is an immense struggle, from housing to education, right the way through." And they haven't taken that seriously. No politician has taken that seriously. But if you think for 1 second that Nigel Farage is the solution to those problems, then unfortunately, I think anybody who believes that will find out at the next general election that they're very wrong.
James, great to have you on the show, and Chloe as well. My thanks to James Mathewson and Chloe Dobbs. This from Deborah. Well done, Chloe, for stepping in when Mathewson was spilling his spiel. He needed telling because he's not speaking for the British people. And Linda in Deal. Mark, has James ever visited Afghanistan? I travelled all over the Middle East in my youth, and the only place I felt safe was Israel, which is why I'm so worried about the way this country is changing. Well, next up, a BBC News presenter has been punished for saying that pregnant people are in fact pregnant women. I'll get a big response to this from a top choreographer next. Don't go anywhere.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It is coming up to 8:53. This is Morning Glory. Mark Dolan with you until 10. Don't forget, at 9 a.m, Rupert Lowe live on the show. But first, a BBC News presenter has been admonished by the corporation for this correction she made in a bulletin earlier this year.
London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine has released research which says that nearly 600 heat-related deaths are expected in the UK. Malcolm Mystery, who is involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions need to take precautions.
So the script said pregnant people. She corrected it with a bit of an eye roll to pregnant women, which is a statement of biological fact. And now she faces censure from her employers at the BBC. Let's get reaction now from one of the country's leading choreographers, the co-founder of Freedom in the Arts, Rosie Kay. Good morning, Rosie. What's your reaction to the news that the BBC are unhappy with Martine Croxall's remarks?
It's just incredible, isn't it? I mean, she's really been tried and found guilty of the crime of face crime, hasn't she? I mean, she hardly even rolls her eyes. She just has a pause, and I think there's a kind of concern that there's poor grammar there going on. What's extraordinary is that the doctor in the question here didn't even use the phrase pregnant people. He used the phrase woman. So it's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. Far be it from me as a bloke to comment on this, Rosie. So can I ask you, as a successful choreographer, a mother to children, how it feels to hear the expression pregnant people?
Yeah, there's something really sort of denigrating about the whole thing, the kind of unable to sort of use the word woman. There's something kind of really dehumanizing about the whole debate. And I think we've got to look at like what the BBC's up to at the moment. I mean, in a week where they've been in the news so much, whether it be about transgender issues or the Middle East, they really have lost the public's goodwill, I believe. I think there's a unit called the Executive Complaints Unit, and I really think the BBC board should have a look at who's running that, how this became a complaint in the first place. Never mind that poor Martine was found guilty. I think we should be looking at who's saying this, on what authority. It's not what the public like, it's not what women like, and I think Martine should be vindicated.
And of course this expose, which featured in the Daily Telegraph this week, revealed that so-called gender critical voices have been silenced by the corporation over several years. Gender critical, by the way, should really be rephrased as gender factual. It's people that believe there are two sexes.
I know. I think you also should look at the case of Rosie Millard, who was the chair of BBC Children in Need, who resigned very much over this matter. And of course, what happened? The BBC didn't report it. They're covering up their own crimes at the moment. And I think we as the public deserve a lot more. We've got to remember it's our money that pays the licence fee, and we've got to demand better from our broadcasters.
You are one of the country's leading choreographers. Have your staunchly gender critical views raised eyebrows in the creative community that you inhabit?
Well, I'm sorry to say that the arts seem to have been very much captured, and the reasons behind that are kind of quite widespread and complex. But yes, I don't know why so many organisations, whether it be the arts or academia or even looking at something like the NHS, have been so kind of lulled into a spell around gender ideology, because it's not a nice ideology. It's certainly difficult and cruel to women, and I just think the public are sick of it.
And briefly, this shouldn't be left all right, should it?
No, not at all. It's about reality and being able to sort of state what reality is. And really, I mean, I set up something called Freedom in the Arts. Maybe we should be looking at freedom at the BBC.
Nicely put. You can follow Rosie at Rosie Kay, K2CO, and do take a look at the work of Freedom in the Arts, a very important organisation. Rosie, thank you for joining us. I know you're having a very busy morning with school runs and walks for the kids, plus the small matter of your glittering career as well, but thank you for those words. Let's talk about Birmingham last night and Aston Villa, because don't forget there was a football match, if you care to notice. Martin Blackburn is Sun Sport's Northwest sports reporter. Hi, Martin.
Good morning, Mark. How are you doing?
Very well. Obviously, it's difficult to focus on the game given the politics around it, but a win for Aston Villa.
There was a win for Aston Villa. Yeah, you're quite right, Mark. It was overshadowed in almost every way possible, really. You know, the sort of atmosphere on the night was particularly tense. There were about 700 police out, on the streets of Birmingham. 11 arrests made, which was probably fewer than you might have expected. But yeah, like you say, there was a football match going on as well, and a fairly comfortable win for Aston Villa in the end by 2-0, and that's another step towards the top 8 for them in the group stage of the Europa League.
And of course, we would like football to be the focus, wouldn't we? What about some news about the England squad?
That's right, Mark. Yeah, that's going to be announced this morning by Thomas Tuchel. There's a lot of speculation in the papers today that Jude Bellingham of Real Madrid will be back in the squad. He's had some injury problems at the start of this season and has been left out of the last couple. Of course, you know, he went into the Euros sort of 18 months ago as England's main man. It'd be interesting to see if he is back. The papers seem to think so. And the other sort of question mark really is Phil Foden, who played particularly well for Manchester City the other night, but has also missed out on the last 2 squads.
Listen, lovely to have you on the show, Martin. Always enjoy the Sun's coverage of all matters sporting, especially football, as a Spurs fan. Martin Blackburn is the Sun Sports Northwest sports reporter. Well, a very big hour to come, let me tell you, including if Rachel Reeves raises taxes, is that the end of her political career? Will she bite the dust? The bad headlines keep coming for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Should he go to the United States, face down the lawmakers and clear his name? And first up, right at the top of the hour, we've got Britain's most fearless politician, Rupert Lowe, live on Morning Glory. Don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, it's just coming up to 3 minutes past 9. This is Morning Glory. A big hour to come. Hateful Britain, anti-Semitic chants and violence as Aston Villa beat Maccabi Tel Aviv in a half-empty stadium. Britain is now becoming a toxic hotbed of sectarian politics. So can the genie go back in the bottle? Meanwhile, as Tory legend and heroic chief Brexit negotiator Lord David Frost steps away from the Conservative Party, and with a new poll revealing that even tactical voting won't keep Nigel Farage out of number 10, are Reform UK officially Britain's next government? Plus, if she raises taxes, is Rachel Reeves's political career over? I'll be asking one of the country's best connected political journalists. And the bad headlines keep coming for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor as he's ordered to appear before Congress over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Should Andrew fly to the United States, face down US lawmakers and clear his name? My priority for the next hour is to get your opinions on the national television and radio airwaves. My number is 03444991000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Can I tell you, it's been an awful week for the BBC, who are now mired in a bias scandal. Are you still paying the licence fee? Well, somebody that gave up doing that years ago is the independent MP for Great Yarmouth and the leader of Restore Britain, Rupert Lowe. Good morning, Rupert.
Morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, and I remember speaking to you about the BBC over many years, long before you entered Parliament, and another week to forget for the corporation.
Well, I wrote a long piece about saying it's time to axe Auntie. I've never liked monopolies. They always go badly wrong, and I think the BBC is a monopoly. It probably served a purpose when it was first set up by Mr. Reith. However, it no longer informs, educates and entertains. And as we saw with the Trump revelations, it actually is quite capable of doing some very malign and devious things. And I think it basically pours poison into the blood of Britain. It's got a very powerful platform, not just on television, but also throughout its local radio stations. So I think it's a bad influence on Britain. I've been very public about that. And if I get anywhere near the levers of power, Mark, I will be defunding the BBC as one of my priority decisions.
What sort of BBC would you like to see? Because some talk about scrapping the licence fee, but it's my understanding that you'd like to go further, Rupert.
Well, I think there is an argument to say we need some form of news feed which gives us accurate, independent, unbiased news, because in the world we have today with AI and all the other influences, I think there is an argument to say that there is a need for that. But as you know, most young people no longer get their news or any other information from the BBC. They've got a raft of other places that they go for their information. And in many ways, as you know, I'm a libertarian, I'm a free thinker. I think if people don't want the BBC and they don't want a news feed, then let the free market take control. But the nanny state likes to have a monopolistic national broadcaster because, on the whole, it's biased towards them. But I think what the BBC now is peddling with DEI and all the other nonsense that they seep into the veins of Britain every day, they are a force for evil, not for good. So I want to see us unite behind common sense and logic, and that's what Restore Britain is trying to do every day. We're a nascent organisation. We're a movement, not a party, as you know. And we just produced our fantastic new document here, Mass Deportations. This is available on our restorebritain.org.uk website if people want to download it. It's proper research, and that's what we need. We need people, independent-minded people, and I was interested to see Lord Frost has gone to the IEA, another organisation which I've funded in the past or helped fund. They produce very good, very sensible, very unbiased research on how to make Britain a better place. The BBC doesn't do that, Mark.
So, Rupert, if you do get your hands on the levers of power, if you have an influence over the next administration, Who gets deported?
Well, I think what we've set out here basically is a clear path to restoring Britain to what it should be. And one thing you have to say, having voted for a nation state, which the British people did, which irritated a lot of the nanny knows best merchants who currently run the country and sit in Parliament with me. What we need to do is protect our borders. And I've been very clear all the way through. We should start by stopping the boats arriving. We should basically detain and deport those people arriving here illegally, those people living here illegally, and those foreign criminals that are currently in our prisons who've perpetrated ill against the British people. They should also be deported. And we've got a number of, we've actually looked at the constitutional reasons which are holding us back, how we effectively resolve those, as we put forward in something we've called the Great Clarification Act. And then we actually go into detail. This is a proper document. This is over 100 pages of proper research by one of the Restore Britain researchers, Harrison Pitt, who's done a fantastic job. But it was a team effort. Everybody got involved in this. He led it, but everybody else, the whole team did it. And it can be done. There's only one thing that we're missing in this country, Mark, and that's a government or a leadership who has the will to do it. And I think they are dancing on dangerous ground because the British people have had enough of it now. They don't want all this illegal immigration. They don't want the Boris wave of legal immigration. So we start with the illegal issues. Illegal means illegal. It's breaking the law. And then we turn our attention to those people who are here, who are not contributing to Britain, who are a cost to our taxpayers, and who are not paying their way. And then we look at how we deal with them. And I think you look at other countries who are doing that, such as Sweden, who's very liberal and did welcome in many people who now they regret welcoming in. You know, you go to Malmo and places, it's almost a sort of crime hotspot in Europe, which it never used to be.
Yeah.
So I think the duty of any government, Mark, is to protect the interests of its citizens, its honest, decent, tax-paying citizens, not to set itself up as some form of prop for global welfare. That's not what we exist for.
Donald Trump was elected or re-elected to the White House in November of last year, Rupert, partly on the strength of a policy that would deport foreign criminals that have entered America illegally. I mean, there are figures of upwards of 12 million people that crossed the southern border into the United States illegally in the course of the last presidency under Joe Biden. And yet Donald Trump is struggling to deport the numbers he'd hoped. Why would things be better in this country, given the fact that you would face the blob if you sought to deport criminals?
Well, as you probably know, in Britain, Mark, with the right leadership, we actually have greater powers to control our borders than they do in the US. The Constitution of the US places legal fetters on what can and can't be done. Our Constitution is unwritten, and therefore there are less fetters. It's easier for us to not only start a program of detaining and deporting, but also a program of what I call deterrence through you know, the removal of the wretched payments that we make to these people and the funding of hotels and all the other things. As you know, I upset Emily Maitlis by saying we should put them on a tented camp offshore, either England or Scotland, and give them a bowl of porridge until they decide to go home. I don't think we should be indulging people, many of whom, you know, we don't know where they've come from, we don't know what their intentions are. And there are people in the country who now think this is a plan. This is a plan to undermine the British people.
Emily Maitlis called you a racist on her programme, The Newsagents. Did that keep you awake at night?
Not at all. Not at all. I asked her if she was comfortable. And as you know, we're doing our rape gang inquiry, which 20,000 people helped us to crowdfund. That's going to be sitting on its hearing in early February, and hopefully we'll have a report out by the end of March. And let me tell you something, Mark. What we have found out so far is absolutely shocking, and it reflects very badly on all organs of the state, but particularly on the police, on local government, and in many cases Labour local government, because it tends to be Labour who relies on the Muslim vote. These are largely Pakistani Muslim men raping underage white working class girls, and our establishment's done nothing about it. So, look, I think there are many things that are wrong with Britain, and the fear of being called a racist was one of them. I asked Emily whether she was comfortable about this, and she denied that it was happening. Well, I can tell you, Mark, definitively it is happening. The state's promised us a statutory inquiry. So far, I always judge people by what the hands are doing, not what the mouth is saying. And so far, Jess Phillips has been saying an awful lot and doing very little. So I'm not sure the government wants a statutory inquiry, but what they want to try and do is filibuster and make it look as if they're going to have one. And many people ask me to stop mine. Well, we're not stopping ours. We are going to produce a very hard-hitting report. And frankly, fear of being called a racist is passé now. I just want my country back. I want common sense to prevail, and I want this place to return to what it used to be, which is the most fantastic place in the world to live when it's working properly.
Rupert, how many deportations could occur annually, do you think, with a realistic prediction in the years ahead?
Well, if you read our document, Mark, we believe that over the next 2 years and 5 months, we could deport somewhere between 1.8 and 2 million illegal people. Those are people arriving, living here illegally, and foreign criminals. So we actually set out a roadmap as to how that can happen. So have a read, and I'm very happy to come on.
How would it be paid for? Because one of the big costs of Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill was to close the southern border. So how would you pay for that with Rachel Reeves's broken economy, Rupert?
Well, again, we've costed it, Mark, so you can actually see that there is a cost, but there is also a huge downstream benefit from that. So I think in order to, we've done this work. This does not lend itself well to a short clip with you. I would urge people to download this and read it. I have actually sent it round all the Tory MPs and all the MPs I consider to be sensible in Parliament. I haven't bothered to send it to the Labour Party because I think they're a lost cause, frankly, and I think most people in Britain can see that now.
Have you sent it to Nigel?
Led by a man who I think has zero principle running throughout his body. So I've sent it to the Reform MPs. I've sent it to everybody. It's on our, as I say, it's on restorebritain.org.uk. So the PDF is there if people want to download it.
Do you think that the leadership of Reform UK will embrace this blueprint for deportations?
I don't know, Mark, because I don't really talk to them. As you know, they tried to politically assassinate me with no basis to it. They made palpably false witness statements against me. They accused me of having early onset dementia. And they accused me of being a bully and various other things. But that has all now failed. And they're going to suffer the recrimination for that, or the consequences of that. But I as you know, I support their initiatives if I think they're right. I've supported Richard Tice with his QE, where I had a 10-minute rule bill on QE. If I agree with people, it doesn't matter whether I like them or not. I will support what they're doing if I agree with it, and that goes for I've supported some green issues. I loathe the Green Party, but at the end of the day, if they do sensible things, I'll support them.
Is there any conceivable way back for you into the Reform UK fold? Because you're a man of action, you've been a successful entrepreneur, you're a farmer, of course, a former football club owner as well. And so you're somebody that doesn't want to be a talking shop. You want to make a difference and you want to exact change. That's only going to be done in partnership with Reform UK, who the polls tell us will be the next government.
Well, look, I mean, I always had an adage in football: you only win things with good people. And after what they did to me, Mark, Reform is not led by good people. It has many excellent and fine supporters who I think share your view and mine that we need a change of leadership. But as you know, fish rots from the head, and if you have rotten leadership, you end up basically with failure. And the genesis of the issue between Nigel and I was I don't think he's got a plan. He got very upset when I said he was the Messiah, but I wasn't sure he was going to lead us to the promised land. And from what I'd seen, I'm not sure he's actually got a plan. I'm not sure, well, he certainly didn't have a plan when I discussed it with him back in December. And delivering for the British people, Mark, is going to be incredibly complex. It's going to require a group of people. It cannot be done by one man leading a sort of social media band. It's got to have good people who are capable of producing the research I've just showed you, and I'd be very happy if you read it and to come on and discuss it with you. But maybe Harrison Pitt would be better to do that. He's actually the one who's done a lot of the detail. But I think we need a group of people. You have to delegate power. You can't accrete power. And I think the problem with our system now is, if you look at this sort of Starmerite failure that we've got at the top, everything hinges on the Prime Minister. I mean, Tony Blair and Cameron basically created almost a presidential Prime Minister. I don't like that. I like the concept of delegation to the cabinet for various parts of the good management of Britain. I don't believe in centralising power. I believe in devolving power. And Nigel wasn't doing that. Nigel aggregates power to himself, and he is not a delegator. He's also, in my view, surrounded by people who are less than intelligent and less than honest. So I think there is a problem for those people those good people who I know support reform. I spoke to a lot of them in September 24 at the conference. I think they're excellent people. I have nothing against them, and I quite understand that they are concerned. But in my view, we cannot raise the hopes of people and then dash them when they give a mandate to somebody who fails. And it's going to be a tough job. It's a very complex job. It's a very legal job, because our judiciary is rotten, our government's rotten, our civil service is rotten. It's going to be very difficult to know where to start, Mark. Not only rotten, I think we're fundamentally now as a country dishonest. That is my considered opinion, having had a good look at the levers of power and the people who pull them.
You are absolutely right to say that Britain's crying out for change. My viewers and listeners are desperate. Would you consider Reform UK to be the least bad option? Because we have to look at first past the post and parliamentary arithmetic. The only way you're going to get close to the change that you desire, Rupert, is with Nigel Farage in number 10, isn't it? That's the reality of the political situation.
It's a long way, Mark, to the next election. And there have been historical parallels to this. I think what we do need to do, and I'm absolutely insistent on this, is we do need to unite common sense thought. I don't call it right-wing thought. That's the label that's given by what I call unsound collectivists. What we need is to unite those people who want to release the individual, to create an economy that generates wealth and allows people to bring their families up in secure, safe surroundings where their children can be well educated.
Rupert, briefly, might you find a happier political home within the Conservative Party?
Well, again, Mark, I talked to the Tories. They've just put me on the Public Accounts Committee, which I'm very honoured to do. I have my first meeting next Thursday. And that's going to give me a much more powerful platform to challenge the government, because rather than sitting in the chamber where nobody is forced to answer a question and the MPs don't have the right of comeback if the question isn't answered, at the Public Accounts Committee you actually are able to ask hard-hitting questions, and you are able to demand answers from ministers and civil servants. I mean, part of the problem, I think, is half the time the ministers haven't got a clue. All they do is spend their time wandering around talking to the media. Whereas the civil service, much of which is, in my view now, run by misguided people. There are some good ones, of course, but there are a lot of people who've been imbued with all sorts of sort of what I call fashionable views of life. And you can hold them to account. But what I can say is taxpayers' money is being thrown around like confetti, and all that we're doing by raising taxes is taxing ourselves into penury. And Rachel Reeves is going to go on doing that until the economy implodes, and everybody's life will become a misery.
Socialism, the failed idea that never dies. Before I let you go, Rupert, we know you're a very busy man. Delighted to have you on Morning Glory today. Can I just offer my commiserations, my sympathy to your lovely wife, who's suffered an egregious crime, the headlights stolen from her car proof, if you needed it, of our lawless country?
Well, as I called it, Sadiq Khan's London war zone, Mark. And as we know, crime, and in my constituency, I'm encouraging my constituents to report crime, because half the time the police say crime is down because nobody reports it. Well, we have reported it, but it's not funny, but my wife called me just as I was about to leave for Parliament, and she was leaving to go home, and said that her indicator lights there was a warning light showing up, and the car was making all sorts of nasty noises. So I walked to the rear of the car and I said, right, put your right indicator on, then your left indicator on. They worked fine. And I walked to the front of the car and the headlights had gone, Mark. And I said, well, it's hardly surprising your indicators aren't working because you haven't got any headlights. And I took a picture of the car. It's an incredibly powerful picture. A car with its headlights plucked out is a bit like a human with his eyes or her eyes plucked out. So it was a very powerful image. And, you know, I think a couple of people stopped and said, apparently this happens because people are stealing the headlights in order to grow drugs. And the headlights off a Porsche Cayenne, this is actually quite an old Porsche Cayenne, but apparently they're very good for two reasons. Firstly, there's very low UV, so the police don't find them very easily. And secondly, they're very efficient at producing the necessary light to grow drugs. So, you know, Sadiq Khan is delusional, Mark. He deludes himself there are no rape gangs, Pakistani rape gangs happening in London. Well, I can tell you definitively there are. Susan Hall constantly tries to get the truth out of him, but he bobs and weaves. And in my view, I'm totally in the Trump camp on him. He's a vile little man, and he shouldn't be anywhere near power. And it's an absolute nonsense that he's been elected 3 times. He has destroyed London, and I'm in London a lot now, much more than I have been lately, and now I'm in Parliament. And when I used to be in London, it was a wonderful place. It functioned properly. There were lots of people. It was bustling and it was busy, and everybody wanted to be in London. It's a dying city now, Mark, and if we don't reverse that, again, Londoners are going to lose a lot of the heritage that they've had, and it will become a lawless and an unpleasant place to be.
I completely agree. And you can't even get a pint in Soho after about midnight. Rupert, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show, and the message board is full of support for the remarks that you've made. Rupert Lowe is the leader of Restore Britain, an independent MP for Great Yarmouth. Steve has messaged the programme saying, good morning, Mark. Hell hath no fury like a Rupert scorned. Your reaction to the comments of Rupert Lowe. Let me also tell you that Reform UK deny any allegations that they claimed that Rupert has senile dementia. And also, just a note on the London mayor. He has his critics, but of course he was elected for a 3rd time by a majority of voters in London who appear to be happy with his efforts. It's all about opinions. What's yours? 0344 499 1000. Next up, is Rachel Reeves' career already over? That's next.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Now it is 9:30. This is Morning Glory. Mark Dolan with you until 10. Don't forget, I'm back in my regular home of Talk Weekend Breakfast tomorrow from 6 a.m. Do join me then. It's been lovely to have your company today. Thanks for the texts, and I'll get to your calls shortly. Many of you admire Rupert Lowe and completely agree with what he has to say about modern Britain and his policies, but you're concerned about the impact on a potential Reform UK government. Ron says, good morning, Mark. Rupert Lowe's view will allow a Labour, Green, Lib Dem coalition to win the next election. He needs to get over his fallout with Reform. And good morning, Mark, says an unnamed messenger. Mark, I always listen to Rupert Lowe when he speaks, and I quite frankly have had enough of him not being able to resist slating Reform, especially Farage. He and Ben Habib have massive chips on their shoulders and need to get over it. They both sound like spoiled children. The more I hear the put down of Nigel, the more I'm likely to vote for him. I've got more trust in someone who stepped aside to help another party who have similar values as you, but I very much doubt Rupert would do anything of the sort. Julie says, Mark, shame on you for allowing that awful Rupert Lowe the leeway to badmouth Nigel like he did. Those of us who are in Reform know exactly what happened between Rupert and Nigel, and Rupert was disgraceful when he was a member of Reform, and now that he's been banned, he's like an angry baby throwing his toys out of the pram. Look, Julie, therefore, not very happy about the interview, but it's all about opinions. Keep them coming. 03444991000. But let's get to the incumbent government, this Labour government. Pressure on David Lammy. Take a listen to this.
We had 800 errors under the last government. This has now gone on for a generation. Our prison system is in crisis, so we have to bear down on this, but we have a mountain to climb. At the dispatch box, I did not have all of the detail. That detail was actually released just later, after I had finished at Prime Minister's questions. I took the judgment that it is important when updating the House and the country about serious matters like this that you have all of the detail. I was not equipped with all of the detail, and the danger is that you end up misleading the House and the general public. So that is the judgment I took. I think it's the right judgment.
Well, is David Lammy now a political liability for the Prime Minister? Let's get the views of the chief political commentator at The Independent, John Rentoul. Hello, John.
Hey, good morning, Mark.
It wasn't the perfect performance at Prime Minister's questions this week, was it?
It was a disaster.
Yeah, what's the issue here with David Lammy? Well, why does he seem to limp from one gaffe to another?
Well, I think, to be fair to him, I think he was extremely nervous about his first deputising for the Prime Minister at PMQs. He realised it was an important event. I think he over-prepared, and he was desperate not to answer a question about an escaped prisoner, or rather a prisoner who had been let go by mistake. And so when Mr. Cartledge asked that very question, I think he panicked, and the result was not pleasant to watch.
Prison escapees have been a problem under various administrations, John, but they seem to have jumped up in the last 12 months. Is that a coincidence?
Absolutely. More than doubled.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it is. Although I mean, part of the explanation is Labour's early release programme, which was forced on them by the inheritance. I mean, to be fair to David Lammy again, he is right. The Conservatives left the prison estate in a terrible state, and having to do this early release scheme was bound to lead to more mistakes. But they have not covered themselves in glory on this, and it is extremely damaging. I mean, the Labour's almost only promise at the last election was that they'd be more competent than the Conservatives, and if they can't be more competent, then what's the point of them?
Most definitely. Well, lots of my viewers and listeners will be asking that question this morning, John. What about this headline in your paper? The Independent and the Eye. This is Labour splits at the top as new deputy leader tells Reeves, don't raise income tax and break the public's trust. Now, this is Lucy Powell, who's the new deputy leader of the Labour Party, and she's telling Rachel Reeves not to do the thing that she's got to do to balance the books. This is very politically unhelpful, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I could see it coming. I said, she was going to win the deputy leadership election because she was not the not Keir Starmer candidate, and that was going to cause trouble for the Prime Minister, and she seems determined to cause such trouble. I mean, it is extraordinary that Rachel Reeves has no support on either the right or the left for putting up income tax. I mean, the Blairites are furious about it because they think she's crushing aspiration, and the left of the Labour Party is retreating into a sort of magic zone of imagining that everything can be solved by a wealth tax. And it means that the Chancellor's in a very, very difficult position.
Yes. If you're not going to cut public spending, which it seems that the Labour Parliamentary Party will simply not permit, if you don't cut spending, the least bad option is to raise income tax, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a very, very difficult position, and you could say she shouldn't have started from here. She should have, Rachel Reeves should have done something about it last year. Last year's budget, in retrospect, looks more and more indefensible. I mean, to leave such a fine margin for things to go wrong was irresponsible, and she'd run out of road in putting up small taxes, stealth taxes, and all the rest of it. So she left herself no option but in her second budget to break manifesto promises. I mean, breaking manifesto promises in your first budget, you could just about get away with, because you could say, well, it is actually worse than we thought, or what the Tories left us. But to do it after you've been in power for nearly a year and a half is going to be an absolute calamity.
Yes, I mean, look, it's my view, and I'm sure, I suspect you'll agree, that Rachel Reeves, if she does have to break one of those manifesto promises, then she's a dead woman walking politically. I think she'll be a political human shield for the Prime Minister, perhaps in 6 months or a year's time. So notwithstanding Rachel Reeves, what about the future for the Labour Party if they break this promise? Is that them basically eviscerated in the next election? Is this a Nick Clegg moment for them?
Very close to it, I think, because it was a central pledge at the last election. I mean, I think actually, if you step back a bit, I think the Labour government was in very deep trouble already. I think if they can't stop the boats, they are going to lose the next election, and there's no evidence that they're going to be able to do that. I mean, Shabana Mahmood, I think, is a very good Home Secretary, but even she can't get the French to do what is necessary, and hasn't got any other plans to stop the boats. So I think to put a tax betrayal on top of that, I think is the icing on the cake.
John Rentoul is the formidable chief political commentator for The Independent. Thank you, John. Enjoyed your thoughts there. Your reaction is Rachel Reeves, a dead woman walking. Is that it now? Labour have lost the next election if they break their manifesto promise. 0344 499 1000. Plus, the BBC, should they be punishing a newsreader for stating a biological fact? I'll be taking your calls on that next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
9:41, lovely to have your company. Let me tell you that Alex Felix is up at 10 a.m. I'm back for Talk Breakfast tomorrow at 6 a.m. And what about the BBC, who are admonishing a newsreader for stating a biological fact that pregnant people are in fact pregnant women? Well, let's speak to an actual full bona fide woman, and it's Mary in Hemel Hempstead. Hi, Mary.
Hello, morning, Mark.
And what do you make of this lady, Martine Croxall, who's now in trouble for saying pregnant women?
Well, it was inevitable at BBC. I gave up my BBC licence about 10 years ago because I saw where it was going. So it's nothing new, is it, really?
Have you missed it? Have you missed access to BBC services?
Not at all. I'm a great reader anyway, so I don't watch an awful lot of TV anyway, but I used to listen sometimes to my local radio, but that went down the pan when they were so pro-Remain in the Brexit debate. I just didn't think that was fair, and that really what decided me.
Mary, I'm going to get to the topic you called about in just a moment, but there's a little bit of drama around Rupert Lowe because so many of my viewers and listeners admire Rupert. They agree with what he's got to say, but they don't like the attacks on Nigel Farage because they want a Reform UK government. What do you make about this? What do you think Rupert should do?
Well, I think it's a great pity that Rupert Lowe left Reform. Really, I wish UKIP and these small parties all united behind Reform for the common cause, because the Uni-Party, as the Conservatives and the Labour Party are a disaster for this country. So I just wish that they would all, sort of come together instead of sniping from the background.
Well, I tend to agree with that. I mean, the right must unite, mustn't they? Because quite clearly at the next election, parties of the left will likely have some kind of electoral pact, Labour, the Lib Dems, the Greens, the SNP. We've got this story today, which is a developing story, Mary, and it ties in with your point that you called about regarding protests. This is migrants are successfully claiming asylum on the grounds that their pensioners and should see out their lives in Britain. Migrant pensioners too old and lonely to deport, judges rule. What do you make of that?
Does that mean they've been living here for many years?
Not necessarily.
I'm lost for words about this, actually. I really am. We've got enough. Our old pensioners are gradually fading away, so we're going to allow some more.
It's pretty wild, isn't it? And what did you make of the scenes last night in Birmingham, England's second city, with anti-Israel protesters and, of course, a half-empty stadium because Jewish people are not safe in this country?
I know, it's shocking. I heard one young man being interviewed. He was a young Muslim. He obviously was born and bred here. You could hear the strong Birmingham accent. And he said he was fighting for the genocide that's being caused against our people. I thought, this is a young man who was born here, and he's talking about people in thousands of miles away as though they're his people. And this is wrong, so wrong. How has this come to this? But you know what, I think a lot of this, I only wish any political party could do and fan the flames in a way with this postal voting. Because if you go into the Muslim vote, in the Muslim household, for example, the man rules supreme. They have several wives, they're known for that, they have several wives and get away with it, have several children, but the wives are given no choice. The organised postal voting is too easy, and so the man of the household, who might be a fanatic for all we know, or just stands with his own, will vote for everybody. Now, he might have, say, 3 wives, he might have, if children over 18, he might have several sons, daughters, might have there might be about maybe 20 in that household. But the man of the leader in the household, all 20 of those votes will go for whatever party the man decides.
Well, Mary, I completely agree with you. I would axe postal votes, and I would make sure that you have voter ID as well, because I do think the system is being rigged. Mary, call me again soon. Loved your company this morning. I've got so many calls and messages that I've not got through today because it's been a packed show. But thank you for all the interaction. Thank you for your company. Next up, should Andrew, formerly Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, should he go to the United States and clear his name? I'll be asking one of the country's leading royal journalists next.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It is 9:50. Another tough week for the man formerly known as Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who yesterday was officially stripped of his Duke of York and Prince Andrew titles in a letters patent drawn up by his brother, the King. Meanwhile, US Congress have written to the disgraced former prince, requesting that he comes to the United States or writes a letter or phones in to provide evidence against the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. So should Andrew go to America to clear his name? Let's get the views of one of the country's leading royal journalists and top biographer, Angela Levin. Good morning, Angela.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
This request on the part of the US Congress will come as no surprise. Do you think that perhaps Andrew should consider this an opportunity to clear his name?
No, I don't think he wants to clear his name because he doesn't believe he's got problems. He's just, he's never done anything bad. But they can't make him. If it's not in the country, they can't compel foreigners to say anything. And the other thing is that they've written to him in a very, very polite way. Would he perhaps allow us to interview you? In other words, it's not absolutely firm. You've got to do this.
Yeah.
And so he won't. He'll run away and hide. I think the whole experience lately has been far more than he expected. And I don't think he would want to go and say anything. And I hope Beatrice should tell him not to, his elder daughter, because he made such a mess of talking to the BBC. He just rammed on. And so I think it's better for himself not to do anything and things to be found out through the letters and the emails that are going to come from the court in America. That's where you know what's going on, rather than get someone to talk to him.
But if he's got nothing to hide, Angela, why doesn't he jump on a plane? That's what you or I would do.
I don't think I would do that, even if it was nothing to do with me, because I would think I might make a fool of myself. I might actually not say the right thing. He doesn't know how to talk in an interview. That's what his daughter tried very, very hard to persuade him not to do anything.
He's not a clever man, is he?
No, he's not a clever man. And he's also puffed up about himself. And so, he always thinks he's so important, and he hasn't actually stopped feeling that about himself. So, he just says what he thinks because he feels he's such a hero, which goes right back to when he was on the sea. And it's not worth his while trying. He should shut up and not say anything for a long time.
He's now going to be living on the Sandringham estate in accommodation paid for by his brother, King Charles. It doesn't sound like much of a punishment to me. What do you think, Angela?
I think psychologically it's a huge punishment because he was so proud of being the prince. He was so proud of being the duke. He's so proud of everything. And if you saw the funeral a few weeks ago of a very, very lovely lady, and he
the Duchess
came
of Kent.
Yes, the Duchess of Kent. He came to the front and he started making something that was funny, and he was roaring with laughter, and William was absolutely furious, as was the King. They just pretended he wasn't there. Now, if you don't know how to behave then, you wouldn't know how to behave in anything. And if he thinks he wants to tell a joke at that time, it's completely inappropriate. And I think he's full of being inappropriate. And he lies as well, so it's really it's a waste of him time trying to sort of get better. He's finished,
yeah.
He's had it.
He's had it. Angela, far be it from me to defend Andrew, but in many ways, is he the fall guy given the number of celebrities and politicians linked to Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't think he's that, but I do think they've ought to go and sort out some other people whose names are very well known and not just go on him. But I think he's very important because he's very senior in a royal family. The others are not anywhere near that. But I think they've got to be interviewed. Let them go and be interviewed. They won't go for miles. You can bet yourself on that one.
What's the latest on Fergie? Because she's now been rendered homeless as a result of this deal between Andrew and Charles.
Yeah, she's deciding where she wants to go. I feel not the least bit sorry for her, for her, because I wonder where she took her children to speak to. To speak to what's his name?
Oh, Jeffrey Epstein, that's right, allegedly to celebrate his release from prison.
Yes, can you imagine anything worse than doing that with two children, 19 and 20, well, not really children, at the age that he loves to have those girls running around him. So I thought that was the most terrible thing. And I just can't believe that we should feel sorry for her. She's spent so much money and she has had free time in their home for 30 years, and it's why I don't think she should do that.
Meanwhile, Meghan Markle returns to Hollywood. Do we know what Prince Harry's making of this? Because, of course, there are some rather handsome leading men out there.
Oh, well, she's very, very pleased about that. He said, I don't mind what she does as long as she's happy. But that's actually, have him round the neck, and he would say that, isn't it? I think it's a joke, actually. She's playing herself in this film. Now, what does that mean? She's just going to be herself? So that's not acting, is it? It's a short appearance, so that's not acting either, is it? She just wants to make herself known non-stop, and that's just what she's doing. But she can't act. She's just not very good at it because she doesn't let herself go. She just thinks how wonderful she is, and it just doesn't work.
And briefly, just to interrupt you, I mean, I've just been looking at that footage of Prince Harry at the baseball, and then that video of him at the home cinema looking as miserable as sin. This is not a happy man in a happy marriage, is it?
Oh, no, but the marriage has been spoilt for a very long time because she's just in charge and he's become a slave. He'll just do what she wants, but he doesn't have a right of his own to see what he wants to do.
Do you think they have a full marriage in the biblical sense? I mean, I don't wish to be, inappropriate on a morning show, but what I mean is, is it what could be described as a full and functioning marriage?
I can't comment on that one, can I?
There you go. Listen, you've dodged a curveball there. Angela, we love having you on the show. I've always been so happy to work with you in various platforms, and I'm most happy to do it here at Talk. We'll catch up again soon. Angela Levin, royal biographer, with me in the studio is someone that never ducks a question, and it's Alex Phillips.
Do I not? I don't know. Try me.
Listen, Angela Levin, right? She doesn't mind sticking the knife into Harry and Meghan, but she won't be led on whether it's a full relationship anymore. What do you think?
I don't know. I wish I was one of those people who engaged in this stuff and could partake in a bit of gossip. Do you know what I think? What I think is this. I think that if I'm going to be brutally honest, she has some sort of personality disorder. Whether she's able to fully love, I don't know. I think he has Oedipal syndrome. She cosplays as his mother and he loves it. And it's all very weird.
It is a bit. Well, listen, luckily we've got British politics to make sense of it all.
Yes, that's
because
what I
we've got
can
an
do.
amazing government that are prioritising working people. They're smashing the gangs. I'm really happy. I mean, mean, you've probably got nothing to talk about for 3 hours.
I couldn't be more chuffed with their performance. I mean, it's a gift, isn't it?
Well, what I like about Keir Starmer is he never lies. That's the thing. He's just an honest man.
And David Lammy especially. I mean, he's so across his brief. I've never seen a more competent group of individuals. It's heartwarming to know that we're in such safe hands.
Well, listen, it's going to be a big 3 hours. What are the big topics for you?
Do you know, the one that I'm really interested in is this survey of public attitudes, which shows that the country really think we're going to hell in a handcart. And listening to the good old BBC this morning, again, a topic I'm going to have to delve into after the Maxine